Hello everyone, welcome to Black Fog, your guide for drifting off. I know you listen to help you fall asleep, so like and subscribe to Black Fog before we start. Where are you from and what's your time? Now get comfortable and relax. I was craving that rush, that gut punch kick of ecstasy that hits you when things suddenly go your way. Good news, that scout dug your show. Good news, they're gonna play it on the radio. Good news, you've sold out a whole stadium. Well into my mid-20s, I believed that burst of joy was something you had to chase. A carrot that propelled you through life, always just out of reach. Once I hung around enough pricey green rooms though, I realized that happy kick can be found in powdered form, like shooting off fireworks from the pit of your stomach. A brilliant explosion in the sternum. Teeth gritting, muscle twitching, howl enjoy happiness. Straight from a mysterious little man who was a stranger not 20 minutes prior. Good news, you're high. When my agent sent me out here, she said it was to get me away from the press. The internet was filled with cell phone vids of my final glorious night. People had all sorts of questions. Answering them would just get me into deeper shit. Last thing I needed was more condemnations. Disappearing off the face of the earth would let people move on to the next star who made a ruckus somewhere public. My agent said I was going to the detox zone to keep a low profile. Nothing to do with the drugs. Not a day into my stay, my gut let me know she wasn't being honest with me. Hunkering down in an unknown rehab facility in middle of nowhere Central Asia would keep me out of the news feeds. That was true. What didn't occur to me on the flight, however, was that you can't find baggies in the middle of the step. I've never considered myself an addict. I've grown up with them. I've been in relationships with them. Hell, I've done a lot of drugs with them. I've always considered myself far too composed and in control to be a junkie. 2 days into my stay, I realized the only thing keeping me from being called an addict was the question of supply and time management. I was craving that rush of raw animalistic victory over the humdrum chemical realities of the brain. Pacing back and forth, digging fingers into palms, shadowboxing with the intensity of a life or death battle. I was jonesing bad. The detox zone had saunas and meditation rooms and massage parlors and sensory deprivation tanks, but all of those were downers. Those things were meant to calm me. I didn't need calming. I needed fuel. I needed a rush. I needed something to plug that gaping hole at the core of my being. It's with that gulping emptiness in my abdomen that I enter the lobby on the third day. I stalk the lobby back and forth, trying to do mental gymnastics about the length of my stay. No matter how hard I try to miscount, my math always checks out. 2 months. No ties to the outside world. Once my reality becomes unavoidable, I let out a long-labored sigh. The receptionist watches me, but he says nothing. When our eyes meet, he gives me a friendly service industry smile. We don't judge at the detox zone, his eyes red. The receptionist remains professional, but I've worked enough service jobs in my younger years to know he'll be bitching about me to his friends off the clock. I slow down. I take a deep breath. I busy myself with the landscape pictures on the wall. Is this a real place? I finally ask, pointing to the biggest frame on the wall. The stone on the picture is dark and ruffled and ancient. With my eyes strained with sleeplessness, I can't tell if I'm looking at a blown-up photograph or an artist's rendition. This? Yes, sir. This is real place. His eyes greet me as if I just manifested into the lobby instead of stomping around in it for 20 minutes. It is real place. We call it, in translation, it would be Valley of Powerful Crab. His manicured hand spreads out towards the glass walls of the lobby. Out beyond the flat, grassy steppe, there's the suggestion of mountains on the horizon. Very beautiful place, the receptionist says. Very calming. What's that? 10K away? Yes, sir, about 10 kilometers. 2 hours away. My feet are restless. Never been much of a hiker, but my feet are restless. Might go check it out, I say. The receptionist's face shifts. A glint of discomfort flashes across his eyes. "Sir, you must not," the man says, his voice dropping by a couple of decibels. "Journey to Valley of Powerful Crab is the bad idea." "Why not?" His brow furrows. He thinks hard while trying to keep up a rehab lobby smile. "It is far," he finally says. "You said 10K. I remind him. "Yes, but 10 kilometers through foreigner in step. It is different. Sometimes foreigner go missing." He glances out of the window and then lowers his eyes. "Sun sharp in step. Dangerous. You should stay in facility. We have good massage. Free for you." I look out of the window at the overcast morning. The mountains aren't particularly close, but the sun seems to be no trifle. "I think I can manage," I say, as I walk over to the exit. "Thank you for the advice." "No," the receptionist yells, his voice bouncing around the empty lobby. His polite smile drains when he hears the echo. "Sir, going to Valley is the bad idea," he says, his voice lowering to a whisper. "I will do explaining, but I cannot explaining here." He watches me, prodding me for trustworthiness. Then he looks around the lobby, assuring himself that there are no other customers. He grabs a piece of paper from behind the counter and carefully writes down a message. "Back in 10 minutes." He walks out the front door of the lobby and I follow him. As we walk through the grounds of the detox zone, the receptionist doesn't say a word. I don't ask any questions. I'm just happy to be in motion. We walk past the gates and out of the facility grounds. Near a cottage that seems significantly less modern than the sleek New Age design of the detox zone, the receptionist lights up a cigarette. He offers me one. I've never smoked a cigarette sober, but beggars can't be choosers. The nicotine is like breadcrumbs to a starving man. The longing at the pit of my stomach isn't satiated, but there's the merest of suggestions that I'm moving in the right direction. You cannot go to Valley of Powerful Crab. It is beautiful place, but it is place of the danger. What's so dangerous about it? I ask, tasting the notes of cheap tobacco on the back of my tongue. Path to it seems empty enough. He looks off to the steppe and the mountains beyond. He nods. "Path is not dangerous," he finally says. "Valley of Powerful Crab is not dangerous too. It is not valley that is the danger. It is what is near valley that is big problem." And dare I ask what's near the valley? He takes another puff, formulating his words. Whatever English vocabulary the man picked up is lacking for what he's trying to express. The smoke comes out through clenched teeth, as if he were trying to spook out something deep within his lungs. "Near the valley is the bad place," he finally says. "Place of big problem, of dark science, of evil magic. It is place we call the Ilimi Ondura." Every syllable of the name crashes through my eardrum like discomforting artillery. The smoke around us grows still, as if the universe itself was trying to cover up our mouths. "The what?" I ask. Once a gust of wind parts the smell of burnt tobacco and returns a hint of normalcy to the conversation. The receptionist doesn't repeat the words. He, instead, starts recommending the various other activities the detox zone offers. There's a yoga class happening every 3 hours, state-of-the-art gym, a pool, and 1,000 other things I could do instead. I smile and nod and smoke and tell him I appreciate the suggestions. But I know exactly where I'm going. Perhaps there have been too many people in my early life who have told me I couldn't do something. Perhaps it is simply the nature of stardom. Perhaps I have just been raised wrong, but I don't like being told no. I bum 2 more cigarettes from the receptionist, slip him a tip, and then go back to my room. The complimentary water thermos and chocolate raided from the mini fridge serve as my supplies for the expedition. I chow down on one of the Mars bars before I even leave detox zone property. As I walk towards the gate, I feel the gentlest bit of excitement washes through my lungs. The tide grows and grows until I reach the edge of the gravel pathway leading out. When I cross the threshold over onto untouched land, things, for a moment, start to feel familiar. I embrace for my neurochemistry to give me a hit, But it doesn't. As I walk across the steppe towards the forbidden valley, my internal life simmers back down towards craving. So I run. I figure I won't feel sluggish if my heart rate picks up, so I run. I've treated my body like a Christmas chemistry set. Didn't expect to get too far. As I pick up the pace, however, I surprise myself. I realize I'm not that out of shape. For the first couple minutes of my jog, I feel good. That tenseness in my abdomen gets stretched out. My thoughts turn sharper and less sluggish, and I'm way too focused on my feet to think about the dread. But then, I get a shooting pain in my side, and then my lungs start to ache. And then I stop. And eventually, as the misery sets back in, I light up one of the cigarettes I bummed from the receptionist. I'm too proud to turn back, and as I walk, that pride gnaws at me. The detox zone shrinks off on the horizon and storm clouds grow to the west of the mountains. But I keep going. When my internal monologue starts to question what I am trying to achieve, I make more attempts at jogging towards the valley. Pushing myself to run takes some of the wind out of my racing thoughts, but whenever I inevitably slow down, my neuroses come back to bite me twofold. I drink water to make up for the sweat. When I eat another bar of chocolate to replenish my energy, the sting in my side turns into a stab. A sluggish thunderstrike rumbles across the steppe. There's lightning on the horizon. By the time it starts to drizzle, I can't see the detox zone anymore. By the time it starts pouring, the sticks in my abdomen become a suitable alternative to not getting drenched. There's a couple of trees in front of the structures of stone, but I do my best to avoid their shelter. Only a moron would stand under a tree during a thunderstorm. I congratulate myself for finding an outcropping of rock to hide under. My self-esteem takes a dive when I remember where I am. My career is publicly imploding and I'm stuck on the other side of the globe hiding under a rock. Why? Because I want to prove something to myself. What was it that I was trying to improve to myself? That I can't quite verbalize. The lower I feel, the more my nose twitches, the more I realize how ragged I've worn my dopamine receptors. Failure scratches through my veins and stretches the crater at the center of my soul. So many people warned me. My family, my friends, the few women that I let see past my built-up walls. They all warned me. They warned me and I didn't listen. I bury my head in my palms and I weep. I weep for my career and my decisions and my past and my future. Above me, the storm rages. Past my sobs, thunder crashes across an unknown land and torrents of water slip down untouched stone. My mind and soul are a deluge of babbling chaos. Yet beyond my wails and the storm, I hear something else. Behind me, pebbles shift. I do not rush to turn around. I feel far too sluggish. The idea of not being alone in my hiding spot doesn't occur to me at all. What I witness, however, drains at the little sanity I have left. Crabs. Massive crabs with thick shells and terrible pincers and bulbous eyeballs growing from their body. There are 3 of them, but with the sheer number of eyes on display, I feel like I am being stared down by an audience. When I see them, I shriek in terror. This sends them scattering toward me. They pinch their claws and their many eyes stare, and I cannot comprehend what I am witnessing. Unsure of whether I have simply gone mad from withdrawal or whether I have stumbled upon something which defies known biology, I run out into the rain. I pay no mind to the storm or where I'm going. The only bright burning goal in my skull is to get away from the incomprehensible crabs. Quickly, I lose them in the curtain of rain. Yet no matter how many corners I turn through the maze of stone, I still feel like I am being watched. I duck through caves and struggle through uneven ground, desperately trying to escape that which I cannot comprehend. When my body finally gives up on me and my legs go limp, I end up in a familiar place. Ruffled dark stone stretches out around me into a grassy clearing shielded by outcroppings of rock. Water slides down from the ancient nature and falls to the earth like a domed waterfall. Even past the curtain of rain, I can recognize the picture from the lobby. I sprawl out against one of the rock walls and make sure I am alone. The crashing of the water from above is loud enough to make me doubt my hearing. but after a couple minutes my heart calms. Past my labored breath and the storm, I hear no crabs. After a couple of more minutes, even my lungs soothe into controlled breaths. The storm above me dies down. The waterfalls which obscure my view of the clearing trickles down into a symphony of dripping rain. After a while longer, even the remnants of the storm disappear. A warm afternoon sun peeks in through the clouds and a slight hint of a rainbow spreads out beyond. I find myself tranquil. I do not know if it is because I escaped the crabs, or whether it is the passing storm, or whether it is the sense of achievement from reaching my vague goal, but I find myself calming. I sit on the stones and watch the beautiful nature beyond. There is no rush in my chest. I do not feel the ecstasy that I have been so desperately craving since that horrible night back home. Yet even though I'm not shaking with joy, I do find myself free of want. That hole at the center of my being is still there, but it no longer hungers. Sitting on the rocks, I find myself content. I find myself happy in the stillness. I sit and I think and I embrace the peace. Time becomes immaterial. My worries still float around the back of my head, but they're weightless. I know that as long as I stay in my little tranquil corner of the globe, my problems will keep their distance. I sit and I breathe and I enjoy the silence. Yet when I see the sun dip out of sight, I concede that I can't spend the night in the mountains. Before I get up and return to the dredges of my real life, I stretch. I stretch and it feels good and I feel like my journey had the slightest shred of purpose. Yet as I lower my arms, I hear something shift behind me. When I turn, I find 100 eyes staring at me from the depths of the cavern. The crabs. The same ones with those shell-grown eyeballs I thought I'd hallucinated. They're back. Their glassy stares are laser-focused on me. With every twitch of my body, the horrible creatures advance towards me, snapping their massive pincers with discomforting volume. My moment of tranquility has sobered me. When I realize that the crabs solely respond to my movement, I calm my breath and steady my hands. With my bones ready to jump out of my skin, I slowly reach into my jacket pocket and take out my last piece of provisions. With as little motion as I can, I throw the Mars bar to the other side of the clearing. Most of the crab creatures scatter towards the chocolate. When the fastest moving of the consortium starts to snip at the Mars bar with its claws, all but one of the crabs join in. As the majority of the hellish creature pass me, I hold my breath and grit my teeth. There is but one left. Its shell is flaky with age and the eyeballs that adorn it are bloodshot. The creature is the slowest of the bunch, yet its attention is singular. Slowly, ever so slowly, it approaches me. Its pincers click with deadly tempo. I reserve hope that maybe the crab creature is simply old and slow to join with the rest of the group, but that hope quickly falters. With every spidery step the beast takes towards me, with every second of unbroken sickly eye contact, I am certain the crab is heading towards me. It's not until the old crustacean is within kicking distance that I act. With one swift movement, I hope to propel the creature towards its brethren. Yet even with its sluggish pincers, the beast manages to grab a hold of my ankle. Blood quickly springs through my jeans and the rest of the crabs skitter in the direction of motion. I do not waste any time. With pain surging up my leg and terror beating in my heart, I run. I do not know where or how I shake the beast attached to my limb, but I do. I rush out of the cave system and out into the flat steppe. As I run past the trees, the sticks in my sides spring up again with renewed strength, but I pay them no attention. My mind is clear of all pain or concern. I have one goal, and that is to get away alive. I run and my chest heaves and I feel the need to lie down and vomit. Yet I do not. I keep running. Even as my shoe fills with blood and lungs burn with exhaustion and spittle drips from my mouth like the jowls of a rabid horse, I keep running. I keep running and I don't stop running until the dot on the horizon starts to take shape into a familiar rehab clinic. It is only once the valley behind me is mere suggestion and the visions of the crabs descend back into the territory of potential hallucination that I slow down. I slow down, walking the rest of the way back to the detox zone. As I do, a familiar feeling starts to bubble in my abdomen. At first, it simmers like slowly boiling water, yet the closer I get, the more the waves strengthen. A rush from the bottom of my stomach to the top of my sternum. Floating bubbles of jubilant ecstasy. A biological victory propelled through neurochemistry. My fists tighten and my lips raise in a vicious smile. My body shoots a message across my mind which dulls every other unpleasant sensation I feel. I do a fair bit of driving for work, sometimes late into the night. It's usually uneventful. Just me, the road, and whatever podcast I've got on. This particular night, I was on a less traveled state route, cutting across country to save some time. My GPS rerouted me due to an accident on the main highway, and this new route took me through some pretty remote, hilly terrain. It was well past midnight, maybe 2 a.m., the kind of dark where the trees on either side of the road look like huddled figures and your headlights are the only proof the world still exists. I saw a sign indicating a tunnel about a mile before I reached it. No specific name, just a standard warning. Tunnels at night always have a bit of an eerie vibe, don't they? This one looked old. A simple arch cut into a massive slab of rock, probably built decades ago. The kind with those dim, yellowish lights spaced out along the ceiling, casting long, flickering shadows. As I approached, I remember thinking it was longer than I expected, disappearing into the blackness of the hill. I slowed down as I entered, the rumble of my tires changing tone as they hit the tunnel's concrete. The air grew cooler, damper. My radio, which had been playing some low-key indie station, started to crackle and then hissed into static. Annoying, but typical for tunnels. I reached over to turn it off, plunging the car into a relative silence, broken only by the engine's hum and the rhythmic thwump-thwump of the lights passing overhead. I was maybe a quarter of the way through. It's hard to judge distances in these things. When I saw him, a figure, standing by the narrow walkway on the right side of the tunnel. Just standing there, his back mostly to me, looking towards the tunnel wall. My heart gave a little jump. You don't expect to see pedestrians in a remote tunnel at 2 a.m. My first thought was that his car had broken down. I eased off the accelerator, my car slowing. As I got closer, he turned, and I saw his face in the dim, intermittent light. He was an older guy, maybe late 50s, early 60s. Looked tired, a bit disheveled. He wore a simple jacket and jeans. He wasn't holding a sign, wasn't thumbing for a ride, just standing there. But as my headlights fully illuminated him, he raised a hand, not in a desperate wave, but a slow, almost hesitant gesture. Common sense screamed at me to keep going. Late night, remote tunnel, lone stranger. It's a recipe for a bad story. But he looked more lost than dangerous. And there was a part of me, the part that hoped someone would stop for me if I were in a similar bind, that nudged me to slow down further. I pulled up alongside him, rolling down my passenger window. The damp, cool air of the tunnel, smelling faintly of wet stone and exhaust fumes, seeped into the car. "Everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. He leaned down a little, peering in. His face was lined, and he had weary eyes. "Oh, thank goodness," he said, his voice a little hoarse. "My car, it just died on me, back a ways. Completely dead." "In the tunnel?" I asked, glancing in my rearview mirror. The entrance was a distant, pale arch, but I hadn't seen any disabled vehicles. No hazard lights, nothing. He shook his head. "No, just before it. It sort of veered off into the ditch right as I was approaching the entrance. Engine cut out, lights, everything. One moment I was driving, the next I was wrestling the wheel to keep it from hitting the rock face. It's probably not visible from the road, tucked down in the gully there." He gestured vaguely behind him, towards the tunnel entrance. Stupid thing. I figured my best bet was to walk through. There's a 24-hour service station on the other side of this hill, about 2 miles past the tunnel exit, according to the last road sign I saw. His explanation sounded plausible enough. A car going into a ditch in the dark, especially if it lost power, might not be easily seen. And he didn't seem threatening, just a guy down on his luck. "Hop in," I said, unlocking the passenger door. "I can take you to the station." "Oh, bless you," he said, a wave of relief washing over his face. "You're a lifesaver, truly." He opened the door and settled into the passenger seat, bringing a gust of that damp tunnel air with him. He smelled faintly of wet earth and something else, something I couldn't quite place. A metallic, coppery scent, very faint. I dismissed it as probably being from the ditch or his old car. "No problem at all," I said, pulling away from the side and accelerating gently. "Horrible place to get stranded." "Tell me about it," he sighed, rubbing his hands together as if for warmth, though it wasn't particularly cold. "One minute everything's fine, the next, well, just grateful you came along." We drove in silence for a minute or two. The tunnel lights continued their rhythmic flash overhead. I glanced at my dashboard. All systems normal. I kept expecting to see the bright arch of the exit looming ahead, but the tunnel just kept going. It was a long tunnel, for sure. I tried to remember the sign, if it had indicated the length. I didn't think so. "This is quite the tunnel," I remarked, mostly to break the silence. "It is, isn't it?" he said, his voice quiet. He was looking straight ahead, at the seemingly endless tube of concrete and dim light. "Goes on a fair bit." Another few minutes passed. I started to feel a little knot of unease in my stomach. I could see, far in the distance, what looked like brighter lights of the outside world, indicating the exit. But it wasn't getting any closer. Not really. I'd been driving at a steady 40 miles per hour, which is the posted limit. We should have been out ages ago. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel. "Are you sure that service station isn't too far past the exit? This tunnel feels like it's going on forever." I tried to laugh it off, but the laugh sounded hollow even to my own ears. The man didn't turn his head. "Not much further now," he said, his voice still soft, almost monotone. "We should be seeing the end properly any second." But we didn't. The pinprick of light that I assumed was the exit remained stubbornly distant, like a star you can see but never reach. I checked my odometer. We'd driven nearly 3 miles since I'd picked him up. This tunnel couldn't possibly be that long, could it? Not out here in the middle of nowhere. A tunnel that long would be a major feat of engineering, something people would know about. My unease was growing, coiling in my gut like a cold snake. I glanced at my GPS. The screen was frozen on the point where I'd entered the tunnel, the little car icon stationary, the map around it unresponsive. "GPS is out," I muttered. "Great. They never work well in these deep places," the man said. His voice was calm, too calm. I risked a quick look at him. He was still staring straight ahead, his expression unreadable in the dim, pulsing light. That faint, coppery smell I'd noticed earlier seemed a little stronger now, or maybe I was just imagining it. "It really feels like we're not getting any closer to the exit," I said, my voice a little tighter this time. "Look," I gestured ahead. "It's been like that for miles." He finally turned his head to look at me. His eyes, in the flickering gloom, seemed darker than before, and there was something in them, a stillness that was deeply unsettling. "Patience," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Tunnels can be deceiving. We'll be out soon, very soon." His reassurance did nothing to calm me. In fact, it did the opposite. There was a subtle shift in his tone, something that wasn't quite right. A weird, almost soothing quality that felt predatory. Then, something else happened. I glanced in my rearview mirror, a habit when feeling uneasy. The tunnel lights behind us, stretching back towards the entrance I could no longer see, were different. One of them, about 100 yards back, flickered and went out, plunging that section of the tunnel into deeper shadow. Then, A moment later, the next one closest to it did the same. And the next. A wave of cold dread washed over me. The darkness was creeping up behind us, swallowing the lights one by one. It was like the tunnel itself was being snuffed out from behind, and the blackness was advancing, chasing us. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The lights, they're going out behind us." The man didn't look back. He kept his eyes on me. "Darkness comes for us all eventually," he said, and this time there was no mistaking the strangeness in his voice. It was deeper, resonant, and held a chilling certainty. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This wasn't right. This wasn't a breakdown. This wasn't a long tunnel. This was something else. Something terrible. The air in the car felt heavy, oppressive. That coppery smell was definitely stronger now, and it was making me feel nauseous. I pressed down on the accelerator, the engine whining as the car picked up speed. 50, 55, 60 miles per hour. The tunnel walls became a blur of streaking concrete. The lights overhead flashed by faster, thwump, thwump, thwump. But the pinprick of the exit remained stubbornly, impossibly distant. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Why isn't this tunnel ending?" The man was silent for a moment. Then he said very softly, "Perhaps it doesn't want us to leave." I risked another glance in the rearview mirror. The darkness was closer, much closer. The last visible light behind us was now only perhaps 50 feet away, and the ones before it were gone, swallowed by an impenetrable blackness that seemed to pulse, to almost breathe. I felt a primal fear, a desperate urge to escape this encroaching void. Felt a hungry, "You need to slow down," the man said, his voice now holding a distinct note of command. It was unnervingly calm. "There's no need to rush." "No need to rush?" I almost screamed. "That darkness is gaining on us. We need to get out of here." "The darkness isn't something to be feared," he said, his head tilting slightly. "It's peaceful. It's an end to struggle." He paused, and then his voice dropped even lower, becoming almost a caress. "You should stop the car. Just pull over. Let it take you. Surrender to it. It's so much easier if you just give in." As he spoke, a profound weariness washed over me. My eyelids felt incredibly heavy. The wheel in my hands seemed to weigh a ton. The thought of just stopping, of closing my eyes and letting whatever was happening happen, was suddenly, overwhelmingly appealing. Peace. Yes, peace sounded good. The fear began to recede, replaced by a strange, inviting lethargy. My foot eased off the accelerator. The car began to slow. The encroaching darkness in the rearview mirror seemed to swell, to welcome me. But then, a different instinct, something raw and primal buried deep inside, screamed, "Danger! Wake up! Don't you dare!" It was like a jolt of ice water. My eyes snapped fully open. The drowsiness vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline so potent it made me gasp. This wasn't peace. This was absorption. I slammed my foot on the brake, hard. The tires shrieked in protest, the car slewing slightly before coming to a jarring halt. The man was thrown forward against his seatbelt, letting out a small grunt. The darkness behind us was now terrifyingly close, a solid wall of nothingness just yards from our rear bumper, seeming to writhe and roil. My hand fumbled for the glove compartment. I always keep my licensed self-defense pistol in there on long drives through unfamiliar territories. My fingers closed around the cool metal grip. "What are you doing?" the man asked, his voice no longer soothing, but sharp, edged with something cold and angry. I pulled out the gun, my hand shaking violently, but my grip firm. I thumbed off the safety and pointed it at him. "Get out!" I snarled, my voice ragged. "Get out of my car. Now!" For a split second, he just stared at me and then at the gun. The dim, pulsing tunnel light caught his face, and I saw it transform. The weary lines seemed to deepen, to twist. His eyes, his eyes, they weren't human. They were pits of utter blackness, reflecting no light, only an ancient, malevolent intelligence. And then he smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It was too wide, too predatory, filled with an unholy glee. The coppery smell was overpowering now, thick and cloying, like stale blood. "You can't escape it, you know," he hissed, his voice a dry, rasping whisper that scraped at my sanity. "It's tasted you now. It knows your scent. Get out." I screamed, my finger tightening on the trigger. The smile widened, if that was even possible. With an unnerving, fluid grace, he opened the car door. He didn't seem bothered by the gun at all. "Very well," he said, stepping out into the dim, oppressive gloom of the tunnel. He stood there for a moment, framed by the open door, the wall of absolute darkness just feet behind him, seeming to curl around him like a welcoming cloak. "This tunnel may let you go for now," he rasped, his dark eyes fixed on mine. "But every tunnel you enter, every shadow you cross, it will be waiting. It has your scent. It will find you again. You can't run from your own darkness." Then he turned and, without a backward glance, calmly walked towards the pursuing blackness. He took one step, then two, and on the third he simply dissolved into it. Like smoke. One moment he was there, a dark silhouette against a darker void, and the next he was gone, swallowed. I didn't wait. I slammed the gear shift into drive, my foot stomping the accelerator to the floor. The tires spun for a horrifying second on the slick concrete before catching, and the car lurched forward, rocketing away from that spot. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Couldn't. I just drove, my eyes fixed on that impossibly distant pinprick of light, praying, bargaining with any god that might be listening. The engine screamed. The tunnel lights were a strobing, sickening blur. I have no idea how fast I was going. I just knew I had to get out. The darkness, I could feel it, even without looking. It was still there, still behind me, perhaps still gaining. And then, suddenly, impossibly, the pinprick of light ahead rapidly expanded. It grew, brightened, resolved itself into the distinct, arched opening of the tunnel exit, with the paler light of the pre-dawn sky beyond. I burst out of the tunnel and into the cool, fresh air of the outside world like a cork from a bottle. I was gasping, sobbing, my entire body shaking uncontrollably. I didn't slow down. I kept accelerating, putting as much distance as possible between me and that accursed hole in the earth. I drove for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only 10 or 15 minutes, before I saw the blessed, fluorescent glow of a 24-hour service station sign. I pulled in, my tires screeching, and slammed the car into park. I almost fell out of the driver's seat, my legs like jelly. I was covered in a cold sweat, hyperventilating. The attendant, a sleepy-looking kid, just stared at me from behind the counter as I stumbled in, probably looking like I'd seen a legion of ghosts. I bought a bottle of water, my hands shaking so badly I could barely open it. I didn't say anything about what happened. What could I say? Who would believe me? I eventually got back in my car, locked all the doors, and just sat there until the sun came up, the gun on the passenger seat beside me. I never saw any sign of the man's car. No ditch, nothing. The road leading to the tunnel and away from it was just an ordinary, empty country road. It's been a few days. I haven't been able to drive through any tunnel since, not even short ones in broad daylight. Every time I approach one, I feel this cold dread, this certainty that it's waiting. His words echo in my head. It has your scent. It will find you again. I don't know what that thing in the tunnel was. I don't know what the darkness was, but it felt ancient and it felt malevolent. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that it's not over. The house sat alone at the edge of town, lit by golden windows and a tasteful porch lantern. It belonged to the Hawthorns. They were the kind of family people named buildings after. Wealthy, well-liked. I actually used to be friends with one of their kids back during grade school. Unfortunately, life for me didn't go as swimmingly. And although I'd never broken into a home I'd once been invited to, jobs around Rainfall were fleeting, and I needed a bigger score than usual to carry me out of this town. And it's not my fault. No, the Hawthorns were the ones who basically killed Rainfall. They had stock in every business that started here, tech startups, green energy projects, even a damn syrup bottling plant. They were globally recognized before their stupid divorce and the disappearance of Mrs. Hawthorne shortly after. It was easy to assume that was Mr. Hawthorne's doing, but she was one of 17 who went missing that month. 16 of them had no ties to the man at all, so he took his kids and left. Business followed him, and what little industry had taken root here dried up and blew away like everything else. The most stable job now is at the dollar store. It's a great, quiet place for hunting cabins. But those of us who live here, we have a 45-minute commute to stock shelves at Walmart. So yeah, the Hawthorns can suck a fat one, but you already know the upside. They hardly ever visit their old home. Maybe a few days every couple of months. And it's only ever Mr. Hawthorne. Outside of that, the house is patrolled by 2 security guards, which used to worry me. But it's clear they're not actually doing full sweeps. Just 2 lazy men with sidearms who get paid to lounge in a mansion and look intimidating. I mean, who would break into a house with security vehicles parked out front, right? Well, when you watch the place for half a year, you notice things. 7 out of 8 security cameras have red lights. 3 of those have ivy or spiderwebs obscuring their lenses. The same porch light's been flickering since February. The back patio entrance? Basic pin tumbler lock. Child's play. But what caught my eye, what really lingered, were the windows. The east side of the basement has 2 narrow rectangular windows, just above ground level. Not only are they locked, but nailed shut. Thick, black iron nails sunk into the brick. And those same 2 windows, the room behind them only lit up twice in 6 months. Both times when Mr. Hawthorne was in town. The room containing the only thing valuable enough for the pompous billionaire prick to come back to town. 2 weeks ago, there were no lights.
No Gartsewak. No Hawthorns.
I'd made my decision. I rounded through the woods in a wide arc to reach a small hole I'd cut into the fence months ago, hidden behind a few overgrown bushes. The grass was damp, but the air was still. I crept along the perimeter until I reached the blind spot of the 1 security camera without a red light, just in case it still had power. From there, it was only a few careful shuffles to the left before I ducked under the patio. I knelt in the shadows and planted my Wi-Fi jammer, flicked it on, and tuned the frequency. It wouldn't reach the cameras in front, but it would be enough to scramble the feeds and alerts tied to the 3 back exits I'd been casing for months. A tight escape net if things went wrong. I chose the sliding glass patio door over the garage side entrance. Both were near staircases, but this one led toward the kitchen and living room, then the basement door beyond that. The garage entrance connected too closely to the bedrooms. I figured if the guards were still awake, they'd be planted on couches somewhere, nodding off to late-night TV. But the house was dark, dead quiet. No action in the living room through the windows, so it was best to prioritize steering clear of the steps by the bedrooms. The lock gave with barely a whisper. 30 seconds, maybe less. I slipped inside, eased the door shut, and clicked the lock behind me. The kitchen smelled like dust and stale coffee. My steps were slow, controlled, sliding forward on the balls of my feet. Every creak in the old wood floor felt too loud in the silence. Past the marble island and the spotless stovetop, through the archway into the dining room. Long table, high-backed chairs, no signs of life, and then I turned. A narrow door just off to the side, tucked between built-in cabinetry. I opened it. The air that wafted up from below was cold and dry, with a strange coppery edge. I stepped through and shut the door behind me. The stairs groaned more than I expected. I froze, waited, counted to 20. Nothing. Then I descended. The basement smelled different, not like mildew or old laundry. It was sterile, bleach, but strangely, it still looked the same as it had when I was a second grader coming over for birthday parties. I'd stepped into the main entertainment space. Two large rectangular rooms joined in an L shape. Aside from the stairs behind me, if I followed the wall at my back to the left, I'd reach the hallway that led to the second staircase and a full bathroom. The door I wanted, the one that led to the room with the nailed windows, sat dead center on the wall that ran alongside the hallway, only about 25 feet from where I stood. Close enough to the stairs, close enough to my exit the same way I came in. Unfortunately, that meant it was in full view of anyone coming down from the other staircase. If someone entered from that end, my only chance was to dive behind the big leather recliner in the far corner, where a cluster of fake plants and a side table offered some cover. I made a mental note of the escape route and the hiding spot, then crept toward the thick, dark oak door. The lock was trickier than I expected. 45 seconds of quiet work before I got the pins to fall. Bingo, I muttered. The door creaked as I eased it open, but I didn't stop when it was wide enough to slip through. I pushed it farther than I needed to, maybe too far. Maybe that was my mistake. A better thief wouldn't have hesitated. Since that night, I haven't opened a door all the way. Not even halfway. I don't think I ever will again. As the angle neared 90 degrees, something gritty scraped beneath the door. A faint drag, like grains of sand or salt. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Dot. Bare feet slapping against tile. Then softer. On carpet. The second staircase. Someone was coming down. I shut the door as gently as I could and sprinted on the balls of my feet, ducking behind the recliner and crouching low behind the fake ferns and dusty side table. And I held my breath. A burly man flicked on the stairwell light. He muttered over his shoulder to someone I couldn't see. Clearly the other guard. It was probably nothing, man. The dust triggers this shit all the time. Just check the kitchen. A laser system? You've got to be fucking kidding me. I didn't understand why it was necessary yet, but I would, very soon. The man trudged down the hall, thankfully too lazy or groggy to flip on any more lights. The only one lit was the stairwell, casting his silhouette deep into the room. His shadow reached the floor just a few feet from my hiding spot. Then he stopped. He was barefoot and wearing sleep attire. The only thing that marked him as a guard was the sidearm at his waist. He scrunched his toes in the carpet and bent down, brow furrowed, picking something up. A speck, a grain. The barrier, he muttered. The words barely made it out. Half gasped, half whispered. My gut twisted. He was about to figure it out. That someone had disturbed whatever the hell that gritty stuff was. Salt, sand, rice maybe. He straightened slowly, put his ear to the door, left hand on the knob. His right unclipped the holster at his hip. You fucking idiot. I blamed myself. I forgot to relock the door, and it was going to raise all of his alarms. My self-loathing swelled even as the rational part of me reasoned that there hadn't been time to lock it. But it didn't matter. He'd know that he'd open it and I'd be. Crash. The center of the oak door exploded inward. A shriek of splintered wood and ragged force. Two long, bone-thin arms burst through. Gray with decay, slick with sinew, mottled with sores that wept pus and rot. Fingers like snapped branches lashed out, tipped with yellowed nails crusted in dirt and old blood. The guard didn't scream. His breath caught in his throat. The thing's knuckled hands clamped around his waist. Not his chest, not his legs, his waist, like it meant to fold him in half. Then it did. A sickening snap echoed through the room as his spine bent backward. He didn't even cry out. His eyes locked with mine across the room, wide, horrified, searching for something, for help. He was sputtering out blood, gawing. The arms continued to pull. It yanked him by his ruined waist into the splintered hole, forcing him through like a toddler jamming the square block into the round hole of a toy. The jagged would peeled him as he went, his face dragging against splinters, his ankles twitching and twisting beneath his head, desperate to follow the rest of him through. Then a wet thud as he hit the floor on the other side. Silence. Then the door creaked open, and it stepped out, shambling, tall, hunched, Its limbs were too long, not inhuman in design, but wrong in proportion. Its spine pushed against the skin of its back like something trying to emerge. The hair on its scalp hung in greasy, stringy mats, the kind that looked like it would all come off in one slick wipe. Then I saw its face, or what was left of it. A slack, dangling jaw crowded with teeth, some animal, some jagged, and some familiar. Human. But what hit me hardest wasn't the teeth. It was the bracelet. Delicate silver links with a small amber stone. The kind a kid remembers because it looks like something no one else's mom ever wore. Paired with a ring I hadn't seen since I was 8. A massive diamond, the most expensive thing I'd ever laid eyes on back then. Mrs. Hawthorne. Scanning the room, the Hawthorne thing nearly locked eyes with me. Her gaze drifted, slow and dragging, pupils wide and black, swallowing what should have been her irises. Those empty eyes crept closer to my hiding spot, like she could feel me, sense me. Could she smell the piss running down my leg? Then, a yelp. From the stairs. The other guard. Her head snapped toward the sound with a twitch so fast it barely registered. Less like turning and more like a glitch. He was gone around the corner, running. I heard him throw down stools in the kitchen to cover his escape. Then she was off. She bolted for the stairs, slamming into the walls as she went. The sound of her sprint, no, something faster than, rattled the floorboards.
Inconceivably fast.
Then came the tearing. Wet, violent, a splash of glass shattering. And finally, the alarm. I gave it a minute. The police station was in the center of town, and I wasn't about to be the next body bag just because I didn't want to bump into the cops. When I finally moved, I tightened the strings on my hoodie and sprinted out the front door. No way in hell was I cutting through the woods, not with Mrs. Hawthorne somewhere out there. For minutes later, lungs burning, I heard the sirens. As they rounded the corner, I dove into a ditch and held my breath while the cruisers roared past. By the time I made it back to my car, parked behind the old bottling factory, I spotted police units from the next town over tearing through the main road. The house burned down by the end of the week. I don't know what the police know, but they're not telling the town the truth. 2 young girls went missing that Thursday. Last time they were spotted was the swing set behind the elementary school. On Saturday, they found an abandoned car out by Observatory Park, near the edge of town. Blood on the dash. Signs of a struggle. There's still a few people who haven't officially been reported missing, but their families are posting, asking if anyone has heard from them recently. During one of the search parties, a sheriff never came back, just didn't return. And in the last 7 days, judging by Facebook posts, 11 pets have vanished. Dogs, cats, even a parrot, someone said. I want to leave. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to run. But they've issued a stay-at-home order. So now I'm stuck here. What the fuck do I do? I heard a faint beep and the click of a keycard registering at the lock. I figured they must have had a hell of a time. Their laughter reverberated down the hall long before they arrived at the room. The woman sauntered in, giggling, kicked off her heels, then strode across the low-pile carpet and opened the mini fridge. I heard the shrill squeak of styrofoam when she placed it inside, probably leftovers from dinner. It smelled like Mexican. Enchiladas maybe, or chili relleno. That was Tom's favorite, the bastard. I watched their feet move closer until they were standing in front of one another. Tom's size 13s were still on. Fucking clown shoes. The woman rose to her tippy toes, and I could hear their lips smacking against one another's. Heat rose in my face to the point I thought my head might pop like one of those cartoon thermometers. I reached for the kitchen knife I had brought from home, and held it over my heart, hands trembling. This was it. This was my moment. I tried moving my legs and arms, stretching, preparing for the physical undertaking ahead. Tom was a big guy. If I didn't do this exactly as planned, precisely as I had practiced, things would go south for me. Fast. My joints ached as I moved them back and forth. I had been hiding beneath this god-forsaken bed for hours. Clothes rained onto the floor where, in my head, I had planned to slide out and pounce on him, plunging my blade through his thick neck. The woman's feet levitated from the floor and then disappeared. She giggled more, the tramp. Then the bed caved to the point of just grazing the tip of my nose when he threw her on top of it. Tom's feet disappeared, one by one, as he mounted the mattress. I noticed the heat had left my face. I was so angry a moment ago, but I noticed now I was feeling something different. My vision blurred and tears ran down both sides of my face as the bed creaked above me. I left the knife on my chest and wiped my tears away. I hated myself for crying. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was the bastard that was supposed to pay today. Pay for the countless nights of phony meetings, just too far out of town to come home for the night. This scenario had played out in my head countless times. I knew where to stick the knife, the precise angle, what I would say to the bitch as she ran screaming out the door, mascara running and tits flopping down the hall, pleading for housekeeping to save her life. And I knew this would be the end of the line for me. He would be dead, and I would go to prison, finally free of his lies. The tears were unstoppable now. I thought about Ryan and Hannah and what this would do to them. I told myself they would be fine. My sister would take them in. She was strong. She didn't let men walk all over her, lie to her, treat her like a used sack. She had a good husband. They would care for the kids. Plus, they were nearly through high school. They had their own lives now. They didn't need me anymore, and they surely didn't need their lying father. I grabbed the knife from my chest and gripped it tight as I could. If I wanted to do this right, I couldn't let this knife get out of my hands. But the knife shook so much, I could hardly maintain my grip. I dropped it on the floor beside me and the handle thudded against the carpet. I froze, wondering if they might have heard, but the bed kept on swaying and creaking. I felt around for the knife at my side, and once I got my hand on it, I couldn't pick it up. The sanity pan in my mind's balance scale plummeted, and I realized I didn't recognize the woman I had become. Was I really going to go through with this? Was I going to throw my life away for this piece of shit? I cupped my hands over my mouth to stifle the cries beckoning at my quivering lips. This wasn't me. I'm no murderer. I'm a mother. I was head of the PDA, for God's sake. My mind did a complete backflip, and I began brainstorming how I could most quickly get out of this shitty hotel room. Finally, all the weight of the past few weeks, all the preparation, all the espionage, and thinking I would grow old in prison, it all drifted away. The woman began panting heavily, then screamed passionately. Fuck, I should not be hearing this. Why did I do this to myself? Suddenly, she stopped mid-scream. Guttural smacks and clicks came from deep within her throat, and the smooth sway of the bed was replaced by feverish shaking and thumping on the mattress. I tried to process what could be happening to her. Was she having a heart attack? No, Tom wasn't that good, the bastard. Finally, the shaking stopped. The room fell quiet and I could hear my blood pumping, so loud I feared they might hear it too. The bed shifted as someone slid across. Then the woman's body flopped to the floor. She laid next to me, staring wide-eyed. The silhouette of fat purple fingers painted her neck. Something I had never thought about before was that death could look fresh. Although she wasn't breathing, there was a faint light still living somewhere within her. I imagined if someone resuscitated her quick, she might make it. Too bare, size 13s pounded the floor on either side of her body, and I recoiled, my brain finally catching up with the events. Tom dropped to his knees, and for a moment, I thought he might bend all the way down and crane his head beneath the bed to say hello. But he didn't. He knocked the woman's clutch from the nightstand onto the floor, sending its contents flying. Tom grabbed a tube of lipstick. He pinched the woman's chin between his fingers, puckering her lips, and delicately applied the bright red lipstick with perfect precision. He then tidied up her eyeshadow, wiping a wayward smudge from the side of her face with his pinky. Then Tom stood and grabbed her by the ankles. I watched as her body slid across the floor and into the bathroom, a captive audience to this one-man show that I feared may have been a rerun. I swear her dead eyes somehow never left mine, locked on, like she was still somewhere in there, begging for me to jump in with my kitchen knife and carry out my plan. Then the bathroom door slammed shut. Maybe I should run, I thought. Now, straight out the door. But what if he returned right as I slid out from under the bed? I didn't want to end up like her. Then I thought about Ryan and Hannah. They don't know what he is. Shit, I don't know what he is. He could hurt them too, but he wouldn't. Would he? I let out a deep breath and resolved to stay put. I would wait until morning if I had to, until he left to dispose of the body. Whatever he did, whatever else I saw here in this room, tonight I had to wait it out. I had to get home to my babies. Growing up, my dad always talked about his family's cottage. It was a little lakeside spot in Ontario that my grandpa built when my dad was young. They spent every summer there. Tales of the dogs being goofy and teenage water sport shenanigans were common around our dinner table. But because my dad had moved across the country here to British Columbia after marrying my mom, I'd only seen the cottage once as a kid. I was 10, and some of my memories of the cottage are pretty vivid. It was my first cross-country flight. It was a place that had been built up in stories for years. But most of all, it was just a fun place for a 10-year-old. Well, most of it was fun. The cottage itself was a bit of a letdown. It was small, 3 cramped bedrooms lined up at the back of the house with a single larger room at the front that housed the kitchen in one corner, the table against the windows at the front, and a little seating area to the side with a shelf of board games and books. My dad and I generally ended our days there with a game or two of cribbage using the old beaten-up board he would pull off that shelf. There was a map of the surrounding area hung up on the back wall and a truly terrifying shag rug in the sitting area. The kitchen relied heavily on linoleum. The dining table was a work of art, though, built by my grandpa with one of the fallen trees on the property, so it was the perfect length for the whole family to have a spot to sit. The cottage had a gently peaked roof and a small stilted porch to keep the whole place level as the lakefront gently sloped down to the water. It was wood paneled all the way around, with an electrical box at the back and a second, burnt silhouette of an electrical box next to it from where the cabin had been struck by lightning back when my dad was in his teens. That trip was the only time I got to meet my grandpa in person, and even then there were a lot of us there. It was a family reunion, so with my dad's 2 brothers, 1 sister, plus spouses and cousins, there were enough people at the lake that most of us were staying at neighbors' places nearby. The only moment I got alone with my grandpa, we played tic-tac-toe on a cheap aluminum set that my grandpa had found down the back of the bookshelf. He beat me 3 times in a row. Not a surprise, I was 10 after all. Just like my dad, he was a sore winner, and I had a sneaking feeling he would have been an even worse loser, though I didn't find out on that trip. But another reason why I have such vivid memories of that trip is because of what happened on the day we were leaving. I was coming up from the water towards the cottage when I saw someone tall and unfamiliar strolling casually around from the back of the house and up towards the front door. Someone I didn't recognize heading up to the cottage wasn't weird. It had happened half a dozen times while we were there. Neighbors came calling pretty regularly, and with so much family in town it might just have been the next distant relation rolling in after us. But 2 things were strange, even to a 10-year-old. Firstly, the way the figure walked was odd, springy, and leaned back like how people look when they walk backwards, except they were walking forwards. And secondly, the figure looked shadowed, like when you're standing in the sunlight looking at someone in the shade. Just a bit harder to make out details. The odd part was it was the middle of the day, and the figure walked through no shady spots. Yet I couldn't make out their face or exactly where their limbs ended. All strange adults are hard to tell apart as a kid, and I was already heading back to the cottage, so I followed it up and through the front door, surprised to find there was nobody inside once I got there. I went through every room of the cottage, checked the closets, checked under the table and the sink. Nobody was in the cottage, maybe for the first time since we had arrived, including the stranger I had just seen enter. It's a little thing, almost certainly a combination of a child's imagination and a bit of misremembering, but now I'm not so sure. Now I think it wasn't a person at all that wandered casually around the back of my dad's old cottage and disappeared inside of it. The important thing to remember is that this cottage existed in Ontario, across the country from where I live. It was built 4 or 5 decades before I was even born, by a man I only met once. My grandpa passed away when I was 14. It was sad, but mostly sad because of how hard it was on my dad. Their relationship was complicated, and I know they didn't get the chance to really sort things out before he went. Not that they ever would have. Neither of them were good at talking about emotions. We flew back for the funeral, but it was hectic and we didn't get a chance to visit the cottage again. It passed to my uncle, Paul, my dad's older brother, and I figured I would probably never see it again. I was very wrong. That summer I was invited to a friend's family cabin on the Sunshine Coast. Ocean coast, not lake. We would be there for a week, romping around and swimming and talking about the girls we liked. The perfect way to spend a couple weeks as a team. When we arrived, we pulled up around the back of the place, wood paneled and one level. I was pretty focused on being a good guest, so I helped pull stuff out of the back, grabbing the massive cooler with a week's worth of food and carrying it around the front, up the steps to the stilted porch and in the front door where I dropped it in surprise. The cabin looked exactly like my grandpa's. It had a long table at the front that was made from a single tree trunk, a horrible shag carpet, 3 bedrooms at the back, a linoleum kitchen in the corner, and a map on the back wall. My friend's family followed me in, and the following interaction went something like this. "Hey, you okay?" asked my friend's mom, clearly a little annoyed I had dropped the cooler. "Yeah, this looks exactly like my dad's family cottage back in Ontario," I replied. "Oh, that's funny. It was probably built around the same time as this place. My dad built it when I was very young. I know architecture wasn't his specialty. He just wanted everyone to have somewhere to sleep and somewhere to eat. We added the porch when I was about your age. Nice to have somewhere to have coffees in the morning, you know? Yeah, I guess it was probably the same with my grandpa. Plus, with the water right there, I suppose there's not that many design options," I said. In the end, I guess I did half the job of convincing myself that it was a coincidence of waterfront cottage design. My friend's mom helped me bring the cooler to the fridge so I wouldn't drop it again, and we finished unloading the car. My bag had been shimmied to the back of the trunk, so I went out last to grab it and close up. And it wasn't until then that I noticed on the back of the cottage there was a scorched silhouette of an electrical box right next to the working one. When I asked my friend about it, he claimed it was caused by them having a fire too close to the back of the place one night. When I pointed out it looked exactly like an electrical box, he said, "Oh yeah, weird. I should have left then, although I don't think it would have helped." Being 14 and not wanting to dwell on anything that didn't involve running around and high school gossip, the spooky similarity of it all slipped out of mind. I had only been 10 when I saw my dad's childhood place after all. On the last night I was staying with my friend, I noticed the map on the back wall was of Lake Country, Ontario, not coastal British Columbia. I would have asked someone about it, but everyone had already turned in. I had stayed up reading, catching some much-needed alone time after a week of sharing space with someone else's family, and had just closed my book and was doing a last look over the cottage, noting the eerie similarities one more time when I decided to take a closer look at the map. It was worn and a little faded, but undeniably Ontario. It had the towns and lakes listed. I brushed my teeth in the kitchen sink, hairs on the back of my neck standing on end the whole time. The cottage only had an outhouse with no real bathroom, and changed in the front room to avoid disturbing my friend. And just as I was going to creep in and try to fall asleep, I heard a noise behind me. It was the clinking of an aluminum tic-tac-toe set. I turned around and my grandpa was sitting at the long kitchen table, pulling the pieces off the little board. He looked up at me and scowled ever so slightly. "Come on, kid, we said we would play, let's play." He looked back down and started sorting the pieces into X's and O's. "I don't believe in ghosts. Not in the way they're generally represented and talked about, at least. If ghosts exist, I think they can only be an extremely personal, immeasurable, and unfathomable phenomenon. And at that point, there were only 3 realistic possibilities for what was happening to me. The first was simply that I had fallen asleep while reading and was having a vivid dream, which was very likely. The second was that this was some kind of hallucination or psychotic break, decently likely considering just how vivid this all was. I could remember where I had been prior to this. I could feel, see, hear, and smell. And finally, there was the possibility that this was a genuine visit from my dead grandfather, his ghost, spirit, or lingering soul. In the first option, I was in no danger. The second option, if my brain had already broken, none of this would matter. And if this was actually a visit from my late grandpa, I figured I should spend some time with him while I could. So I sat down at the table and played tic-tac-toe. At some point between the ages of 10 and 14, I had gotten a brief spurt of interest into game theory, strategy, and solve games. So I knew how to always win, or at least never lose, at tic-tac-toe. We started playing in silence, and it being a children's game, the first round ended quickly, with me winning. My grandpa scowled again, squinting at the board. "Finally learning, boy. Good," he said, but he didn't look happy about it. The next game he went first, and we drew. "It's cold here." "Eh?" my grandpa said as we were setting up the board again. "Wasn't expecting it to be so cold." "I guess," I said. "It wasn't that cold, nippy at worst." I followed it up with the question that had been burning at me since I sat down. "How are you here, Grandpa?" He smiled with his lips pressed together. "I'll need a scotch before I can answer that properly," he said, and gestured for me to go first. "Did you just come to play tic-tac-toe with me? Do you have something you want to tell me? Or ask me to do?" He huffed. "Can't a man just play some games with his—" He looked up at me and then back down at the board. "Grandson? Is that so strange?" He placed his piece. "It is if he's dead," I thought to myself, but apparently the powers of authority and ancestry extend beyond death because I didn't say it out loud. I placed my next piece and my grandpa got very still. I think he was realizing he was going to lose again. "Let me win," he said quietly, looking down. His voice had gone flat and cold. "What? Why?" I said, perhaps a little more sharply than I should have. It was stupid, but when I was 10 he had never let me win. Why should the rules change now? "Please," he said, and something fell out of his mouth onto the board. It was a tooth. He looked up and said, "Please let me win. I can't stay here." But I couldn't register his words because one of his front teeth fell out as he spoke, and before it could hit the table, another tooth folded into place from behind it. Another tooth, then 2, then 3 fell out of his mouth, pushed by teeth from behind like dominoes, but they were coming faster than his teeth could fall, clattering tinnily onto the aluminum board. His mouth was full of teeth and they weren't slowing down. "Please," he yelled, muffled by a mouth full of bone, and stood up, reaching out to grab me by the shoulders. Before he could touch me, a voice said something behind me and I wrenched around to ask for help. My friend was standing there looking disgruntled and not at all freaked out by the tooth-filled old man behind me. I looked back and my grandpa was gone, along with the fallen teeth and tic-tac-toe board. It was just a quiet, empty cabin looking out at the water. Apparently I had been yelling and had woken my buddy up. I apologized and said I would explain in the morning. I think he could tell that I was freaked out because he didn't push any further, and we clambered into the bunk beds to sleep. I was very glad to be in a room with another person, but I didn't get very much sleep that night. I told him the whole story on the drive back the next day, everything from the cottage similarities to the strange figure to my grandpa begging to win. When I got finished, he held his arm up to me. "Look at that," he said, pointing at his arm. "You got my hairs to stand on end. Dang dude, why didn't you tell that one around the fire last night? That's a perfect ghost story. I'm gonna steal it." I told him I was serious, that it wasn't just a ghost story, but all he said was, "I believe you, man. That's why it's so spooky," and then said he would draw a salt ring around the cottage next time we went. But I was never invited back, mostly because life changed quite a bit for me when I got back home. My Uncle Paul had died suddenly that weekend. He had been sick on and off in his youth, and the combination of immunosuppressant drugs he had been taking for decades were hard on his heart, which gave out. Uncle Paul had visited us every third Christmas or so. He called regularly. He was close with my dad. Obviously, my father took the news hard, compounded by the fact that a lot of Paul's estate was passed on to him, including the cottage. My dad got very busy very fast. On top of his work, he was flying back and forth to Ontario to sort his brother's will, organize the funeral, visit the family. Paul had been a fun uncle but a bit of a disheveled individual from an adult's perspective. He had made some strange monetary decisions that my dad was determined to rectify, or as my dad used to say, "What kind of an idiot would do that on purpose?" This was often followed by an angry outburst at whoever made the next loud noise, and then a period of quiet stillness where he was clearly trying not to cry, and everyone else was trying not to make any noise. My dad was never great with emotions. The summer I was 16, we flew out as a family to Ontario. It was a concentrated effort to see our relations for something other than a funeral, since those had been the only other times we'd been back. We did a bunch of touring around, saw our parents' childhood homes, went to a Blue Jays game, and went up to the cottage. I was pretty apprehensive. I had divulged my terrifying evening at my friend's cottage when visiting Ontario had first come up, and that launched my dad into a story about his ghostly visit from an old Boy Scout leader when he was in college, which led to a story about the one time he had tried magic mushrooms, which led to the beginning of a story about Uncle Paul's stoner phase that my dad stopped halfway through. I brought it up again as we were pulling down the long drive towards the cottage, but my dad didn't respond. My brother called me a coward and pulled out one of my arm hairs. We crept around the final bend and could see the cottage, its scorched back end the definitive marker. To me, it seemed to be hunched down and waiting, poised on non-existent haunches waiting to spring, full of a strange and undesirable life. But to my dad, it was clearly far too devoid of life. We came to a halt and nobody got out of the car. Everyone was silent. Then my dad started to cry, the full-bodied sobs of a man left without a trace of his childhood. His cottage once bustling with life and happiness. Youth and family was now just an empty shell, a few walls and a roof. Hollow. My mom put a hand on my dad's arm until the sobs stopped, and then without a word we turned around and began the drive back. I couldn't help but feel relieved, and also a little guilty that I hadn't been able to summon any excitement about the cottage to make my dad feel like it was alive again. Life was normal for a long time after that. I went through high school, got into one of the local universities, met a girl, all the big life stuff you're supposed to do. Everything was as it should have been for a long time, and it was the easiest thing in the world to forget one odd coincidence that caused a bad dream when I was 14. And then my dad got sick. It started as skin cancer. Normally skin cancer is one of the most treatable types, but it cropped up on him fast, small, and in multiple spots. The doctors did the best they could at cutting the tumors off, and he was doing chemo regularly, but they clearly missed something or it was just too aggressive. It got into his lymph nodes and spread beyond the point of operation. It was about a year and a half of watching my dad wither, being eaten in parts by the many small cancers across his head, his jaw, his back, as well as by the treatments trying to keep him alive. It was slow and brutal. You could hardly recognize him by the end, not just physically because of the many surgical sites that had never healed properly, his locked jaw taking his weight down to just a skeletal frame, but also because all of his fiery emotion had been sapped from him. He was hollow when he died. Skin and bone and weeping sores, missing teeth and glazed eyes, with sickly skin and a crooked back. The following months were a roller coaster of terrible emotions. Anyone who's been through grief will tell you something similar, but I was finally starting to come out of it when my girlfriend's family invited me to their ski cabin for a weekend. It would be a nice couple days away from it all. Some cold air in my face and a cozy fire sounded perfect. Her parents were always talking about this cabin, the chateau as they called it, because they had been slowly and painstakingly renovating it by hand for the last 3 years. They were always excitedly mysterious about it when pressed, just saying they had put a lot of work into it and we would get to see it when it was ready, which it finally was. My girlfriend and I drove up together on Friday after class, her family already up there opening the place up. The sun was out and I was feeling well and truly happy. Music playing loud, landscape snowy and clean. I wasn't thinking about how this was my first time visiting anything resembling a cottage since I was 14. After all, it was the chateau, not a cottage in any sense of the word. But when we pulled into the cul-de-sac, my blood ran cold. I knew this place. The chateau stood out like a sore thumb. Every other cabin was made of a mix of stone and rounded logs, with firewood stacked under steep A-frame eaves and small windows to make insulation easy. The chateau was my dad's old cottage, wood-paneled, gently peaked roof, a stilted front porch that should have been impossible on flat ground, but for some reason wasn't. My girlfriend parked the car and hopped out excitedly. "Come on! I can't wait to see what they've done with the inside," she said and bustled up the steps. The sight of her going upstairs but remaining on the ground floor hurting my brain, and disappeared inside. I got out into the silent white stillness of the winter evening. I walked around back to find the burned shadow of the electrical box where I already knew it was. I stood in front of the cottage in the quiet, feeling numb but not from the cold. I guess I don't quite know why I went inside. Undoubtedly, there was the naturally dangerous human curiosity that drove it to a certain extent, the need to find out how this could be, but there must have been more at work inside of me than just that. I may never know. I was expecting to find my girlfriend's family inside, the three of them marveling over a linoleum kitchen that looked like it was from the 70s even though they had just renovated it, a shag carpet, an inexplicable map of Ontario. But this time the cottage didn't wait for the deep of night. When I stepped inside, there was only one person there, still skeletal thin, cancerous sores still openly weeping. My dad. In his hand, he clutched a cribbage board. It was the same one that lived on the bookshelf in his childhood cottage. This cottage, as I'm now sure it was, and he clutched it in his emaciated hand like a drowning man clutches a lifesaver. As I entered, my dad began to move, painstakingly making his way over to the long kitchen table and began to set up the cribbage board. "Come on, kiddo, let's see if I can skunk ya," he said. It was clear that he was trying to be lighthearted, trying to summon the essence of cheer we used to have when we played crib on weekend afternoons. But the cancer in his jaw meant he had to speak through nearly clenched teeth. And his eyes were still so hollow. I had sat down and cut the deck before I really registered it. I had dreamt of my dad pretty frequently since he died, always something along the same lines. I would be going about a regular day when I would be struck with the sudden reminder that my dad was dead, that I would never see him again or hear his voice, and just as I would begin truly breaking down over this fact, he would arrive. Walk in through the front door or bike up the driveway, not just alive but cancer-free and happy. And then, in the midst of my new relief that his death had all been a terrible misunderstanding, I would wake up to the reality that he was in fact gone. This was like the reverse of that. I felt like I was in a dream where I thought my dad was alive. He was right in front of me after all. But he would drop dead just as I realized it. Maybe that would be for the best. We played in silence. The cards were shuffled and handed out, decisions made, pegging done back and forth, points counted, and repeat. It's impossible to truly get enough time with the ones you love. Impossible to say absolutely everything you need to say, but despite this, we played in silence. Just the sound of cards and pegs. I was losing. I had been playing with my head down for some time, afraid to meet my father's hollow eyes. When I heard him make a noise and looked up, the tumors on his head had grown, multiplied horribly beyond what they ever had been in life, blood streaking from burst skin and dripping onto the table and floor, flaps of skin and chunks of hair dangling from his face, forced aside by the swollen tumors. His jaw was now totally locked by the masses, but I saw that for the first time tonight, the first time in months before he died. His eyes were clear. "Run," he said, clear as day. I did. I didn't hesitate. I didn't wait for him to repeat himself. I can't help but feel like in that moment it was truly my dad speaking to me, not the horrid cottage that had been following me for the last decade, or whatever terrible creature that had made its home inside of it, but some version of my dad that reached out to speak that word. I leaped for the door, the old hinges squealing as I ripped it open. I heard noises behind me, wet splatters like massive zits popping, and the sound of something hard and brittle scraping across wood. As I got the door open, there was a sound like someone twice my size vomiting and belching at the same time, and a gust of air was vacuumed past me into the cottage. I didn't look back. I made it to the car and got it started with no issues, operating entirely on instinct, before I looked up as I backed down the drive. The mouth of the cottage yawned open, my dad's disfigured form silhouetted in the entry, seeming to hang like a puppet rather than stand. I drove away in a daze. My girlfriend called me 20 minutes later. I immediately felt awful. I had ran, without sparing a thought for her or her family, and realized with a wash of relief when she called that I had assumed they had been absorbed or murdered by the strange cottage. Hearing her voice was a balm. I made up a lie about getting a frantic call from my mom and apologized for not coming inside to let her know about my sudden departure. I resolved to ask her about the chateau later, what she saw when she entered it, where she had been when I went inside, but I was too rattled to ask then and there. I don't think anything she would have said would have helped. At most it would have made me sound crazy, although I suppose I must be. You see, I drove home to my mother's house, my childhood home, where I grew up, where my family still lives, the most comforting place I know. A building I am so intimate with I can navigate it inside and out with my eyes closed. But I turned the corner onto our block just now, and it isn't my home that's sitting just behind the sidewalk. It's my dad's old cottage. Started exactly 1 week ago, last Tuesday. I came home from work, just a regular day, nothing out of the ordinary, and there it was, sitting on my doorstep. A small package about the size of a thick novel, maybe a bit wider. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, the kind you get from a roll. It was sealed very thoroughly with clear packing tape, like someone really didn't want it to come open accidentally. The weird thing was, there was no return address.
No stamps. No postmark.
Just my address, neatly printed in the center in plain, black, block capital letters. It looked like it had been typed on a label maker or maybe printed from a computer. It was definitely my address, perfectly correct. My first thought was that a neighbor had dropped something off, or maybe a local delivery that didn't go through the usual channels. I wasn't expecting anything. I picked it up. It wasn't particularly heavy, but it felt solid. I shook it gently. Nothing rattled. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen counter, and just stared at it for a bit. There's a certain level of unease that comes with an anonymous package, you know? Especially these days. But it wasn't ticking, it didn't look suspicious in that way. It just looked blank, impersonal. I considered opening it right then, but something held me back. A little niggle of, I don't know, caution? Or maybe just the fact that I was tired from work and wanted to unwind. I left it on the counter and mostly forgot about it for the rest of the evening. The next day, Wednesday, another one arrived. Identical. Same brown paper, same meticulous taping, same typed label with my address. No return info, no stamps. Just there, on my doorstep, waiting for me when I got home. Now, 2 is a pattern. This wasn't a misdelivery or a friendly neighbor anymore. This was intentional. I felt a prickle of anxiety. I picked it up, and it felt exactly the same as the first one. Same size, same weight, same lack of rattling. I placed it next to the first one on the counter. They looked like twins. My mind started racing. Was it some kind of weird marketing gimmick? A prank? I asked my immediate neighbors if they'd seen anyone drop anything off. Mrs. Henderson next door, who sees everything, said she hadn't noticed anything unusual. I even called the local post office, described the packages, and asked if they had any record of a delivery service that might operate this way. The guy on the phone sounded bored and unhelpful. Basically told me if it didn't have postage, it wasn't their problem. Could be a courier, could be anyone. He'd mumbled before suggesting I call the non-emergency police line if I was concerned. Thursday, another package, same as the others. Now I had 3 of them lined up on my counter. The anxiety was definitely stronger. This wasn't funny anymore. Felt invasive. Someone knew where I lived, and they were deliberately, repeatedly sending me these mute, anonymous things. I did call the non-emergency line. I explained the situation to the officer who took my call. I tried to keep my voice calm, rational. "Look, I know it sounds minor," I said, "but it's 3 days in a row now. Identical packages, no sender info. It's just unsettling." The officer listened, or at least I think she did. She asked if the packages seemed threatening, if I'd been threatened by anyone. I said no, not overtly. They just were. She suggested it was probably a misguided prank, or maybe some company's bizarre sample distribution. "You could just not accept them?" she offered, as if I had a choice when they were just left on my doorstep. "Or throw them away if they're making you uncomfortable. Unless there's an actual threat, sir, there's not much we can do about someone leaving items on your property if they're not hazardous." Helpful. So helpful. Friday. Package number 4. I actually felt a knot in my stomach when I saw it. I didn't even want to touch it this time. I nudged it with my foot first, then reluctantly picked it up. Same. Exactly the same. The pile on my counter was growing. Felt like they were watching me. Saturday. Package number 5. I was starting to feel besieged. I wasn't sleeping well. Every creak in the house made me jump. I kept looking out the windows, hoping to catch whoever was doing this. I even stayed up late on Friday night, watching the porch from the darkened living room. But I must have dozed off because there it was on Saturday morning when I went to get the newspaper. Sunday. Package number 6. My weekend was ruined. I barely left the house. I just kept staring at the 6 packages. They were a silent, oppressive presence in my kitchen. I'd walk past them, and my eyes would be drawn to them. What was inside? Why me? The questions looped endlessly in my head. I thought about taking them somewhere, the police station maybe, and just dumping them on their desk. But what would that achieve? They'd already told me they couldn't do anything. I considered opening them, of course. Many times. The curiosity was immense, a burning itch under my skin, but it was mixed with a potent dose of fear. What if it was something horrible, something dangerous? The not knowing was torment, but the knowing could be worse. My imagination, fueled by lack of sleep and growing paranoia, was conjuring up all sorts of grim possibilities. And then yesterday, Monday, the 7th package arrived. I saw it from the window as I was making coffee, my hands shaking slightly. Another one. 7 days. A full week. That number, 7, it felt significant. Ominous, even. Like an ultimatum or a countdown reaching its end. I didn't go to work yesterday. I called in sick. I couldn't have focused anyway. I spent the day pacing, staring at the 7 packages now lined up like grotesque brown bricks. The kitchen felt smaller, the air thicker. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I couldn't let this go on. I had to know. The not knowing was eating me alive. So I decided, last night, I'd wait until it was late, until the world outside was quiet. Then I would open them. All of them. The hours crawled by. I tried to distract myself with TV, with a book, but my gaze kept drifting back to the packages. They seemed to hum with a silent, expectant energy. Or maybe that was just the buzzing in my own head. Finally, around midnight, I couldn't stand it anymore. The house was dead silent. The only sound was the frantic thumping of my own heart. I went to the kitchen. The 7 packages sat there accusingly. I took a deep breath, grabbed a utility knife, and picked up the first one, the one that had arrived last Tuesday. My hands were clammy. The tape was tough, layered. Took some effort to cut through it cleanly. I peeled back the brown paper carefully, as if disarming a bomb. Inside, there was a simple, white, unsealed envelope. Standard letter size. My name and address weren't on this inner envelope. It was completely blank. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out what was inside. It was a single sheet of plain white paper, a 4-size like printer paper. On it there was a drawing, a child's drawing, or at least it looked like one, done in what looked like black crayon or maybe a thick marker. It was crude, simplistic. It depicted a house, 2 windows, a door, a triangle roof. Simple, but it was my house, unmistakably. The shape of it, the placement of the front window, even the slightly crooked gutter I've been meaning to fix. It was my house. To the far left of the page, almost at the very edge, was a stick figure. Just a circle for a head, a line for a body, 2 for arms, 2 for legs. In one of its stick hands, it held another, smaller line with a blob of red crayon at the tip. A knife, a bloody knife. Above the drawing, at the top of the page, were 2 words, also seemingly handwritten in that same black marker, in messy block letters. Day 1. I stared at it, a cold dread seeping into me. Day 1. This was the package from last Tuesday. My house. A stick figure with a bloody knife far away. What did it mean? My breath hitched. I reached for the second package, the one from Wednesday. My fingers fumbled with the utility knife, my movements jerky. I sliced it open, pulled out the identical white envelope, then the single sheet of paper. Another drawing. The same house, my house. The same stick figure holding the same red-tipped knife. But this time, the stick figure was a little closer to the house. Not dramatically, but noticeably. It was no longer at the very edge of the page. It had moved perhaps an inch or 2 inward, towards the drawing of my home. And above this drawing, Day 2, a wave of nausea hit me. Oh God, no. I scrambled for the third package, tearing at the brown paper with frantic energy. Envelope, paper, drawing. Day 3, my house, the stick figure, closer still. Now it was about a third of the way across the page, marching steadily towards the depiction of my sanctuary. The red on the knife seemed brighter, somehow, more deliberate. I didn't need to be gentle anymore. I ripped open the fourth package. Day 4. The stick figure was halfway to the house. Its crude, featureless circle head seemed to be staring right at the front door. My front door. My breathing was shallow, ragged. A whimper escaped my lips. This couldn't be happening. It was a sick joke. It had to be. But the sheer, methodical commitment. 7 packages, 7 days, package 5. Day 5. The stick figure was now much closer, maybe 3/4 of the way there. It was almost in the yard of the crudely drawn house. The knife it held seemed larger, or maybe it was just my terror magnifying it. I was shaking uncontrollably now. My hands were slick with sweat. I could barely grip the utility knife. Package number 6. The one from Sunday. I slashed it open, not even bothering with the envelope, just ripping the paper out. Day 6. The stick figure. It was practically at the porch steps in the drawing. Looming. Its presence filled that side of the page. The red on the knife was a sickening smear. 1 package left. The one from yesterday. Day 7. I hesitated. A part of me, a screaming, terrified part, didn't want to see it. Wanted to burn them all, to pretend this wasn't happening. But I had to. I had to know how this grotesque storyboard ended. With trembling fingers, I picked up the 7th package. It felt colder than the others, heavier, though I knew it was an illusion, a product of my fear. I cut it open, pulled out the envelope, pulled out the page. Day 7, the drawing, my house, and the stick figure. It wasn't just close. It was there, standing right in front of the door. Its stick arm was raised, the one with the bloody knife. It was positioned as if it was about to knock, or to slash. Its featureless head was tilted slightly. I stared at the page, my blood turning to ice. The silence in the kitchen was absolute, save for the roaring in my ears. Day 7. Today. The stickman was at my door. In the drawing. Knock, knock, knock. I screamed. Not a loud scream, more like a choked gasp. A sound ripped from my throat. The sound had come from my actual front door. 3 distinct, solid knocks. My heart leaped into my throat, threatening to choke me. I stumbled back from the counter, knocking a glass to the floor. It shattered, the sound unnaturally loud in the charged silence. The drawings, the stickman at the door in the day 7 picture, and now this. Who's there? I managed to call out, my voice a hoarse whisper. I didn't expect an answer. I didn't want an answer. Silence. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. The stress, the horrific drawings. Then it came. Not a voice. Not another knock. It was a tapping. Top, 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 top. It was light, almost delicate, like fingernails on wood. But the rhythm, it was a melody. A perverted, skeletal version of a lullaby. Slow, deliberate, chillingly patient. Each tap seemed to resonate through the house, through me. I was paralyzed. Every horror movie cliché, every primal fear, it was all real, all crashing down on me. The drawings were a countdown, a warning, and the clock had just struck 0. The lullaby tapping continued, a soft, insidious rhythm against the wood of my front door. Top, 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 top. Over and over. My mind, finally jolted out of its frozen terror by a surge of adrenaline, screamed one word. Police! I fumbled for my phone, which I'd thankfully left on the counter. My fingers were clumsy, slick with sweat. I almost dropped it. I dialed 911, my breath coming in ragged gasps. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, professional, a stark contrast to the chaos erupting inside me. Someone's at my door, I stammered, trying to keep my voice from cracking. They're trying to get in. I think they're dangerous. Okay, sir, what's your address? I gave it to her, my eyes darting between the kitchen doorway, which led towards the front hall, and the drawings spread out on the counter. The day 7 drawing seemed to mock me. Is the person still there, sir? Yes, I can hear them. They're tapping, like a song. My voice was trembling so badly I could barely form the words. Please hurry. I got these packages. They showed this happening. Sir, I need you to stay on the line with me. Are you in a safe location in the house? Can you lock yourself in a room? I'm in the kitchen. The front door it's locked. But what if a lock wasn't enough? What if the stick figure wasn't bound by normal rules? The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was somehow worse. Pregnant. Expectant. Sir, are you still there? The operator asked. Yes. The tapping. It stopped. My voice was barely audible. Okay, officers are on their way. They should be there in approximately 5 minutes. Can you see the front door from where you are? No, not directly. The layout of my house meant the kitchen was towards the back. But I'm not going near it. The operator tried to keep me calm, asking questions, but my attention was fractured. Every shadow seemed to move. Every tiny sound the house made, the settling of wood, the hum of the refrigerator, sounded like a footstep, a breath. Those were the longest 5 minutes of my life. I clutched the phone, staring at the drawings. The progression, the relentless approach. It was so methodical, so patient. Then, finally, I heard it. The blessed sound of sirens in the distance, growing closer. A wave of relief, so potent it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. Soon, there were flashing blue and red lights painting my windows. I heard car doors, voices outside. Then, a firm, authoritative knock. Police! Open up! This time, I almost ran to the door. I fumbled with the deadbolt and chain, my hands still shaking, and threw it open. 2 officers stood there, expressions serious, hands near their holsters. Are you okay, sir? One of them asked, his eyes scanning past me into the house. I think so. They were here, at the door. I babbled, ushering them in. The knocking, the tapping. I got these packages. I led them to the kitchen, my words tumbling out in a jumbled mess as I tried to explain the week of anonymous deliveries, the decision to open them, the horrifying drawings. I pointed to the 7 sheets of paper laid out on the counter. The officers exchanged a look. One of them, older, with tired eyes, leaned down to examine the drawings. He picked up day 1, then day 7, his expression unreadable. The other, younger, walked through the ground floor, checking windows and the back door. Everything secure, no sign of forced entry, the younger officer reported when he returned. The older officer looked at me. Sir, when we arrived, there was no one at your door. We checked the perimeter of your house as we approached. No one. But I heard them. I insisted, my voice rising with a new kind of panic. The knocking, the tapping lullaby. It was right there. We understand you're upset, sir, the older officer said, his tone carefully neutral. These drawings are disturbing, I'll grant you. Could be some kind of very elaborate, very cruel prank. A prank? I felt a surge of frustration. This isn't a prank. This thing was at my door. We have a street-facing camera down at the corner, the younger officer interjected. It sometimes catches activity on this block. We can check the footage from the time you called. See if anyone was approaching or leaving your property. A small flicker of hope. Yes, please. You'll see. They called it in. We waited. The kitchen felt cold again, the adrenaline ebbing away, leaving me exhausted and raw. The older officer asked me more questions. If I had any enemies, any recent disputes, anyone who might want to frighten me this badly. I couldn't think of anyone. My life is quiet, normal, or it was. After about 20 minutes, the younger officer's radio crackled. He listened, then looked at me, then at his partner. His expression was strange. Not quite pity, not quite skepticism. Well, I urged. He cleared his throat. Dispatch reviewed the camera footage from the last half hour. There's no one, sir. Nothing. No one approached your door. No one was on your porch. The street was empty at the time you made the call. The words hit me like a physical blow. No one. The camera showed no one. But I'd heard it. The knocking. The tapping. It was real. I know it was. The officers were sympathetic in that professional, detached way. They suggested I might have been under a lot of stress, that the drawings had understandably freaked me out. They implied I might have imagined the sounds, my mind playing tricks on me after such a disturbing discovery. One of them even gently suggested I might want to talk to someone, a doctor, maybe. They documented the drawings, took my statement. They said they'd file a report for harassment, but without a suspect, without any physical evidence of someone actually being there. There wasn't much more they could do. They assured me I was safe. They even did an extra patrol around the block before they finally left. I locked the door behind them, the multiple locks clicking into place with a sound that offered zero comfort. Safe. They said I was safe, but I didn't feel safe. I felt more exposed, more vulnerable than ever. If there was no one there, then what had I heard? What was tormenting me? I gathered the 7 drawings, my hands still trembling. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. They were evidence, even if only I believed it. I put them back in their envelopes, then back in the brown paper wrappers, and tucked the whole terrible collection into a drawer, as if hiding them would hide the truth. I didn't sleep at all last night. I sat in my living room in the dark, listening. Every creak, every groan of the house settling was the prelude to that knock, that tapping. But it didn't come until tonight. It's now just after midnight. The same time I opened the packages last night. The same time the knocking started. And it's happening again. As I'm typing this, I can hear it. Knock, knock, knock. From the front door. Clear as day. Or clear as night. My heart is a frantic bird in my chest. I called out, "Who's there?" Just like last night. My voice was a pathetic, shaky thing. No answer, just silence for a beat. And then,
Top, 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 top.
the lullaby is back. Fingernails on wood. A delicate, horrifying rhythm. I know if I call the police, they'll find no one. The cameras will show nothing. They'll think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But that tapping, it's real. I'm listening to it right now. The soft, persistent. It's not demanding entry. It's just there, reminding me the stick figure from day 7 might not be physically standing on my porch. But something is. Something invited by those drawings or something that sent them. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped in my own home, terrorized by a sound no one else can verify. I know how this sounds. You're probably already swiping over to the comments to accuse me of lying or insanity. And believe me, I'd be better off if it were so. Insanity would be a kinder fate than whatever this is. My 8-year-old daughter, Lily, is smart, inquisitive, a little shy, perhaps, but always energetic. She used to laugh at everything, bad knock-knock jokes, cartoon voices, even the wash machine sound the washer produced when it went out of balance. I hadn't heard that laugh in over a week. But the blinking thing, it started 3 days ago. Or perhaps that's just when I realized. I picked her up from school, asked her how she was doing, and she answered in a flat tone like none I'd ever heard. It was fine. The bell rang too many times. I didn't know what to do with that. What does that even mean? That night, at dinner, I caught myself staring at her. Not because of anything she'd said. She hadn't said much, but because her eyes were just open, wide, shiny, unblinking. I watched her spear mashed potatoes into her mouth with mechanical precision, never once looking away from that glassy stare. Lily, are your eyes bothering you?
No,
Do you need drops? They look dry.
no.
I blinked. She didn't. That night, I went to check on her, expecting that she would be sleeping. She was in the center of her room instead, in the dark, her arms loose at her sides, her head slightly lifted up as if she were listening to something I couldn't hear. Her eyes were open. Sweetheart. She didn't move. I moved closer, quietly. I swear I wasn't trying to scare her. But she still responded. She swiveled around to face me, but not altogether. First her eyes, then her head, then the rest of her with a sickening lag, as if I was seeing her on the internet. And then she smiled. Only it wasn't her smile. Go back to bed, Daddy, she told me. You're still not ready. Her voice was too level, too steady. Lily has the tiniest lisp. This one did not. I stepped away from the room, closed the door, didn't sleep. Day 2 was worse. She did not attend school. I told the office she had a stomach virus. The real reason I didn't want her around other kids. I didn't want her around anyone. I just wanted to figure out what the devil was happening. But every time I looked at her, she was already looking back at me. I caught her staring from the hallway mirror, from the crack of my bedroom door, from behind the drapes in the living room. She'd appear in rooms that she hadn't entered. I ceased to hear her footsteps. I ceased to hear her breathing, but I saw her. At lunchtime, I was in the kitchen, pretending to cook. I looked up and saw her standing in the yard, bare feet, gazing at the kitchen window. She did not blink. A few minutes later, I heard her voice behind me. I brought the bell inside, she said. I turned. She wasn't wet. She wasn't muddy. She hadn't opened the back door. And she was holding something wrapped in newspaper. I didn't want to open it. I didn't need to. That night, I tried to test her. I flashed flashcards. I lit up harsh lights. I blared ear-piercing noises. I showed her that notorious viral video of the girl jump-scared by the mirror ghost. Nothing. Her eyes didn't budge. I aimed a flashlight directly into them. No reaction.
No weeping.
No dilation of pupils. She breathed softly. You'll lose if you keep playing. I have no idea what that was. I still don't. By the third night, I had lost nearly 60 hours of sleep. I sat in the hallway outside her door with a bottle of wine and a kitchen knife that I had no idea how I'd come to pick up. I left the lights off. I didn't want her to see me. She did. She stood outside her door at precisely midnight, sneaked into the hallway, and knelt down beside me. "You look sleepy," she said. I didn't answer. "Do you want to stop blinking, too?" I had shaken my head. "It's okay," she had whispered. The thing behind your eyes already said yes. And then she had touched me, 2 fingers, pressing slowly on the skin underneath my lower eyelids. I jerked away from it, but the pressure remained, like the memory of it was seared underneath the surface. That was yesterday. Today I can feel it. The burn, the itch, the watching, like something is huddled in the back of my head, behind my eyes, stretching, waiting. And she's still staring at me, standing in the doorway of every room, whistling some tune I don't recognize. Every time I blink these days, I can hear it clearer. It's not in my ears. It's in the back of my eyes. Lily hasn't blinked in 3 days, but neither have I. I followed her like I did most nights. First a few car lengths behind until she parked, and then on foot, far enough back I could blend into a crowd or patch of shadows if she started to look my way. But no, she was focused tonight. One hand was gripping the strap of the bag she had slung across her back, and the other was clenched down at her side. She was moving at a good speed too, cutting across a parking lot and then a side street before suddenly heading back in my general direction on the far sidewalk. Heart hammering, I ducked my head and tried to look casual as I went into the nearest store. It was a small, dingy convenience store, and I made a show of looking at a rack of dusty-looking gum while watching her continue down the sidewalk a bit more before stepping into a gap between 2 buildings and out of view. "Fuck!" I muttered it under my breath, but still winced at the sound as soon as it escaped me. I needed to stay unnoticed and unremarkable to everyone, not just her. Lurking in the front of a store and cursing weren't helping that. Pushing the thought away, I went back outside and cut across the street. She was farther ahead, almost out of sight, but I was close enough to see her duck through a break in a security fence and disappear. What was she doing? She'd never deviated out of her routine like this before. As I drew closer to the fence, I slowed down a little. I was still about 50 feet back from where I thought she went through, but from the outside, this entire long fence seemed to go around the same property. Most of it was covered by a combination of chain link and faded blue tarps, but in some spots there were holes big enough to look through. Glancing around, I saw no one else in sight. I took a deep breath and bent down a bit, looking through a sizable tear to see if I could catch a glimpse of her or where she was going. I saw her almost immediately. She was down on her knees, using a small shovel to dig a hole in the back corner of the weed-choked lot. Wiping sweat from my eyes, I watched her work for the next few minutes until she seemed satisfied with her work. Then, pulling a dark box from her backpack, she seemed to put it in the hole before using the shovel to bury it there. What was this? Some secret stash? Before long, she was done with her work and stood up, stretching her back before putting the shovel in the bag and heading back toward the security fence. I moved away from the hole quietly and backtracked to around the corner of the lot. Using my phone to peek out around the edge of the fence, I saw her starting to move away down the street. I felt a moment of indecision. Did I stay or go? Better to ask. Pulling up my texts, I sent a short message. "She's buried something in a lot. Do you want me to keep following her or investigate what's in the lot?" Almost immediately I got a reply. "Make note of the burial spot so you can find it again, but keep following her." Giving a thumbs up emoji, I stuffed my phone back in my pocket and stepped back onto her trail. Late last year I lost my job, and a couple of months later I got a job at a furniture store selling chairs and mattresses and dinette sets. Not my dream, but it would be fine if we had more customers. As it is, I wind up working odd jobs to make up for my commission shortfalls. Keeps me pretty busy, but I don't mind. I do most of it through one of those gopher contractor websites. You know, the type where people are looking for someone to do something that either requires specific skills or knowledge or something that they can't or don't want to do themselves. I've cleaned out garages, gotten groceries, even organized an old lady's closet by color and season, with a lot of help from her. There's variety, most people are nice enough, and sometimes the money is even worth the time and effort. There was nothing especially unique about Connie's listing. It just said she needed help with some life stuff before a big move. I figured it would be packing or cleaning or errands, all of which was fine so long as it stayed reasonable for the pay. When I sent in my interest notification, she responded almost immediately, asking if I could come by for an interview the following day. It was a little odd, but not unheard of. The pay was good and her apartment was in a rich part of town, so maybe she wanted to weed out people that might steal from her or something. When I went the next morning, I had to knock for a couple of minutes before she came to the door. Laughing, she waved me in, apologizing for not coming sooner. "Henry, he's that stern guy that let you up downstairs. He texted me you were here. I'd already let him know to expect you, of course. But I didn't hear my phone and I've been running around so much and..." She let out an exasperated sigh. "Anyway, sorry I'm so scattered. Glad to meet you, Madison." I smiled and shook her extended hand. She was probably in her mid-30s, only a few years older than me, but she seemed so different. More adult and refined, beautiful and confident, but not condescending. I was a little intimidated, but I still liked her right away. No, that's no problem. Sounds like you've got a ton going on. You're moving, right?" She rolled her eyes. "No, not me. I'm trying to make some new arrangements for a couple of family members, though, and it's wall-to-wall details. Then there's my sister, Abby. I'd like to get her to move too, but one step at a time." Connie smiled again. "Which that is actually what I... Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Come sit down and tell me more about Madison." Over the next 20 minutes, we talked about the details of my life. Where I grew up, that I had a sister and two parents who all lived a couple of hours north and who I didn't see as much as I should. Where I'd gone to school and worked, even what kinds of movies and TV shows I liked. It was all done in a very casual, conversational way. But by the end, I realized I'd told her a lot. Enough, it seemed, because suddenly she shifted gears again. "So, Maddie, I think you're a great fit for this. I can tell you're a good and responsible person. Someone I can trust. And I need just that for what I'm going to ask you to do." I nodded, more than a little curious what the job was by this point. "Okay, thanks. What kind of work did you need?" She bit her lips slightly, hesitating before throwing herself into a fast, flowing answer. "Well, my sister that I mentioned before? She's my baby sister, right? A wonderful girl, very smart and talented. But, well, the last couple of years she's fallen in with kind of a seedy crowd." Connie stopped, her eyes widening. "I don't mean like because they aren't rich. God, no, I'm not a bitch." She gestured around her. "I have this shit because my parents died early and loaded, not because I'm special." Giving an embarrassed-sounding laugh, she went on. "But these people..." She started dating this guy, Rex. Real piece of shit. He cheated on her. She found out after a year, broke up with him. Then the real problems started. I frowned. What? Did he start stalking her or something? She shook her head as she gave a small, angry snort. Not him. The bitch he was running around with. She's crazy or something. Started showing up outside my sister's job, her apartment, you name it. She's smart enough to not make any direct threats, but she's still stalking her. Did she call the cops? Finally, when I made her, for all the good it did, they basically blew it off. Said there's been no threats or attempts to hurt her, and no corroboration that she's even following her around. I think the real reason is because she's a girl and they don't take her seriously. Either of them. Just girls fighting over a boy. You know the bullshit. Connie raised her hand. And let me be clear, I don't think this girl is actually dangerous. I think she's just fucked up and obsessed. But that doesn't stop it from driving my sister crazy. I need to get proof of what she's doing so I can get it to stop. I nodded. I understand. But, what does that have to do with me? Connie grinned. I want you to follow this girl for a few weeks, not stalk her. Let me be clear. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I don't want her harassed or you go anywhere you're not allowed to go. That kind of thing. And she doesn't know you, so she can't be intimidated just because she might see you around from time to time. She blinked. Which, the idea is still not to be seen. This is like you're a private detective on a stakeout or something, right? Just keeping track of where she goes when you have time. Usually early morning and early evening are the main times she's fucking with my sister. Anyway, after a few weeks of that, when it looks like there's enough proof that she's stalking my sister, I can get you to write out an affidavit describing what you've observed. I can give that, along with my own affidavit, to the police, and maybe then they'll feel enough pressure to arrest her and make her stop for good. She paused, staring at me for a moment. Does that sound cool to you? I stared back for several seconds, trying to collect my thoughts before responding. Maybe. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with me doing this? She nodded. Totally sure. I asked our lawyer and everything. Like I said, so long as you don't interact with her, mess with her or her stuff, or trespass anywhere, you should be cool. Hopefully she won't even know you're ever there until it's too late. Or better yet, maybe you watch her and she calms her tits and leaves my sister alone. I slowed, returned the nod. Yeah, I'd like to help, but it sounds super weird. Connie's smile fell away, her eyes growing sad. Look, Maddie, I'll be honest with you. This whole thing isn't easy for me. I don't trust people easily, and I don't like asking for help. But talking to you, I can tell you're someone I can rely on and trust. I really want it to be you that does this for me. I sighed. I know, but I forgot to mention the per diem. Huh. She grinned again. Well, I know you get paid for jobs you accept through the app company or whatever, but I'd want to give you extra money in cash for every day you follow her. For food, gas, and your time. An extra $100 for every hour, if that sounds fair. I went to respond when she stopped me. And I know this sounds like I'm bribing you, and it's because I am. I was planning on doing $25 an hour, but that's before I met you. Please, help me out, Maddie. It sounded too good to be true. But was it? Despite what she was saying, there was some risk in taking the job. If the girl noticed me, she could flip out and attack me or call the cops regardless of what Connie's lawyer may think on the subject. That's a lot of money, at least to me. Connie waved the idea away. Listen, you can't live like that. I used to be like that, and it's a negative way of thinking. Appreciate the good luck when it comes. This is what we deserve. I nodded. I guess. No, say it with me. This is what we deserve. I looked down at my feet. This is what we deserve. If I was careful and didn't get noticed, and if I didn't do anything that broke the law, it was a lot of money. And I got to help her and her sister. And weird as it sounded, it might even be fun. Meeting her eyes, I nodded. Okay, I'll try it, so long as it doesn't get too intense or weird. Connie lunged forward to give me a big hug. Oh, thank you. No, it'll go great. I promise it'll be awesome. When she finally let me go, she pulled out her phone to check something before looking back to me. Can you start tonight? The first night was hard. Connie was great, giving me all the information I'd need. Where to find the woman, her name was Sally, what she looked like, what she drove, where she worked. She even had a rough schedule of where she tended to be when, though Connie said it was mostly guesswork based on the time she was messing with her sister and that Sally's job was working as a temp at a normal 9 to 5. I normally got off at the furniture store around 4, so I went home, changed and grabbed something to eat before heading over to her apartment. I was already parked down the street when I saw her car come by. She turned into a small lot of private spaces that I couldn't see from my vantage point, but thankfully she came back toward the front office to check her mail before heading into her apartment. It was definitely her. She didn't look weird or crazy or anything, but then how would I know? And even if she was perfectly normal and Connie was the weird one, what did it matter? I wasn't doing anything wrong, and I was getting paid well to hang out and walk around a little. A great deal while it lasted. I kept repeating those thoughts throughout that night like a mantra, a chant to steal my nerves when I started feeling nervous or guilty. I sat there until after 9 and was about to fall asleep in my car. I'd planned to stay until midnight to maximize my money, but I was wondering if I'd make it past 10 at the rate I was going. It was all just so boring, and I'd had a really long day. Just then I saw Sally pulling back out of the lot. Pulse quickening, I waited a few seconds and then followed her. Just like with finding Sally, Connie had given me enough details about her sister that it wasn't hard to tell where my meal ticket was going. Sure enough, 20 minutes later she was sitting outside a condo that Connie had already told me belonged to her family. Her sister had been living there since college and didn't want to leave it even if it meant throwing her stalker off her trail. Sally parked across the street in a small lot for the adjacent park, and I parked half a block down from that. I laughed to myself a little at how ridiculous this all was. All we needed was for Connie's sister to head out, and then we'd have a conga line of cars stalking each other. I'd no longer finished the thought that I saw a woman walk out the lobby doors of the condominium. I didn't know what Connie's sister even looked like, but Sally clearly did. As soon as the woman got on her bike and headed out, Sally followed. And, of course, I wasn't too far behind. This wound up being a short trip. The sister was just going to pick up food and then was back. And by 11, Sally seemed satisfied with her evening's work and headed home. I forced myself to hang around Sally's place until midnight, and then I did the same. After that, it got much easier. I'd gotten a taste of how benign and boring it all was for one thing, and for another, I realized I kind of enjoyed it. Sally was obviously kind of fucked up. In the first week alone, she spent 4 nights lurking around Connie's sister, whether she was at home, a bar, or over at someone else's place. Sally was clearly obsessed. But at the same time, she hadn't really done anything other than be a creeper, had she? And I didn't get the idea that Connie's sister had even noticed her. So how much did it really hurt? I started to sympathize with Sally a little bit. Some troubled woman, probably being fucked with by this asshole dude they had in common. And she was coming out to lurk out this lady because she was sad and angry and wanted something in her life she could control. By the second week, I looked forward to going out to stalk Sally. Not because I wanted to make her life worse, but because I almost felt like I was performing some kind of service, providing some passive protection for Connie's sister while giving Sally some needed companionship whether she knew I was there or not. This went on for a month, and overall my life was going pretty well. I was a bit sleep deprived, but my bills were getting paid and I woke up most days in a much better mood, even if the days themselves tended to drag until I was following Sally again. And every week I'd go back to Connie and give her my notes and updates, copies of photos and videos I'd taken to prove everything I was doing and for how long, all the while dreading that she'd say that it was enough, that it was time to pull the plug and go to the police. Every week she would thank me, hand me an envelope full of my per diem, and then she'd chit-chat with me for a few minutes, asking how my family was doing, how I was enjoying the furniture store, things like that. When that wind down, she'd give me a hug and tell me she'd see me again next week. It was on the 3rd day of the 5th week that Sally changed her routine. I followed her to an abandoned lot where she buried a box. And then, at Connie's instruction, I left the box and followed her home. The next day, I couldn't find Sally. Not at her apartment, not at work, not at Connie's sister's place even. I actually took off the day after to look around for her more. But no luck. It wasn't until the 6th day that she popped up again. I first saw her coming out of her apartment. This was in the morning, which was unusual for me, but I'd called out of work for a second day to try and track her down. When I saw her, I immediately knew something was wrong. I'd never spoken a word to her, but her body language and expression was different, and her face was drawn and haggard. She looked like she hadn't slept and had been crying a lot. Why? I had the insane urge to hop out of my car and go ask her. Shaking my head, I watched her walk to her car's trunk, get out a suitcase, and roll it back into her apartment. So she'd gone on a trip or something. I sat outside for another 4 hours, but she didn't budge again. It wasn't until 2 days later that she started back to stalking Connie's sister again. That went on for another couple of days, and then she changed her schedule again. She went off to the outskirts of town, an area I'd never seen her visit before. Parking her car at a pharmacy, she walked off down a back street toward a rundown residential area. It was hard to follow directly behind her on such a straight road, so I cut through areas close by, trying to keep her in view most of the time. When she reached an old elementary school that looked closed down, she headed up the driveway, over a short fence and into what had once been a playground. Stopping next to a jungle gym, she squatted down and began to dig with both hands. It didn't take long before she unearthed a metal box that was similar to the one I'd seen her bury a few days before. I couldn't see her face as she turned it over in her hands, but I could still make out the shuddering anger or fear that caused her to tremble as she studied it. Standing up, she dug something out of her jeans. A small key, maybe, because next she put her hand near the box and the lid popped open. Sally took out several things one at a time. Some looked like papers or photos, though I couldn't say for sure at that distance and with a chain-link fence partially obscuring my view. Another looked like a small cell phone. She watched a video of some kind, I think. I could hear screaming on it. She was shaking more as she turned away, stuffing something in her pocket while sticking the box under her other arm. Glancing around, she suddenly dashed off toward the school buildings. I was torn as to whether to follow her or not. On the one hand, I didn't like the idea of being exposed going up to the school, and I had no idea where she was going. On the other, I had no idea where she was going, and I didn't want to lose track of her. Grimacing, I ran across the street to the driveway, up and along the closest building on the opposite side from where she'd gone. It looked like the school was made up of 4 long buildings that met in a large breezeway in the middle, so if I eased up to the corner I might see where she was going. As I drew closer to the center, I saw a door on the far building had its window busted out and was sitting partially ajar. I edged closer. Had Sally really broken into? I felt the barrel of a gun poke me in the ear. Why did you fucking do it? My bladder felt loose as I stifled a scream and rolled my eyes to the right. It was Sally, red-faced and crying with eyes filled with rage and murder. The gun shuddered slightly along with the rest of her, but it was still pressed against my skull. Jesus. What did I do? She poked me harder with the gun. You fucking know. Now get inside. She followed me through the broken door, gun pressed tight to the back of my head. My mama, you burned her alive. I noticed you the last couple of weeks. I kept seeing you. Thought maybe you were following me, but I thought it was guilt. Me being paranoid. I turned enough to look at her out of the corner of my eye. What the fuck? I haven't hurt anybody. I don't even know your mama. Another poke. That's not what the fucking letter said. The photos of you, the video of her burning and screaming. I saw the bitch I've been following bury it, so maybe she's in on it too. But the box only talked about you, and I know you've been following me. I went to shake my head and stopped myself. I saw you bury a box too. Why did you do it? She shrugged slightly as her frown deepened. My boss told me to, just like he had me follow this bitch that left the box. Some jealous ex or something that cut his tires and was stalking him. Grimacing, she stabbed the gun into the side of my head again. And I'm not an idiot. I see he's part of this too, and he's going to get his. But that doesn't mean I'm going to let you get. Her words cut off as Connie slit her throat from behind. A spray of blood shot across my neck and chest before I managed to get far enough back. Sally was holding her throat, trying to keep the rest in, but it didn't matter. She met my eyes, stumbled once, twice, and then she toppled over. Take that sweatshirt off. Rub your face, ear, and hair with it. It'll blend in with your dark hair, okay? But you can't go back out looking like that. I wanted to argue, but the idea of having any more of the blood on me than I could help repulsed me. So I quickly stripped it off and scrubbed the side of my head with while staring at Connie. She looked calm and composed, and other than a couple of small drops on her gloves, There wasn't a sign of blood on her. What the fuck is this? She smiled. This is me saving your life. She would have killed you.
Ik leerde her.
Because you put her up to it. Connie raised an eyebrow. I've never met this woman before in my life. Then how did you know to come here to? I spat out a wad of blood into the sweatshirt before doing air quotes. You know, save me? She laughed. Because I knew where you were, and I had gotten information that today you'd need my help. That's not an answer. Her face grew more serious. Because you're not asking the right questions. What you should be asking is why am I standing over a dead body and asking stupid questions instead of getting away from all of this? I felt my stomach clench. She was lying to me, but not about that. What the fuck do we do? She pointed at me. You give me the sweatshirt. Do not step in any blood as you leave. Walk back to your car casually, avoiding any witnesses, and then you go the fuck home. Burn your clothes and take a long shower. I will take care of this. No one is going to look here for anything when I'm done. And if they did, they won't find anything connected to either of us. When she held out her hand for the sweatshirt, I handed it over. Sound good? I nodded. I mean, I guess? She sighed. Listen, I get that you don't understand what's going on. That hurtful as it is, maybe you don't trust me right now. But what choices do you have better than this? I frowned. What if you call the cops on me? Frame me? Or decide to kill me? Connie rolled her eyes. Look, if I wanted to frame you, I wouldn't be helping you cover this up. I'd have slit her throat, run out and called 911. Easy peasy. And if I wanted to kill you, she chuckled. My SUV has plenty of storage. Barely an inconvenience. She frowned at me and waved the hand holding the straight razor she'd used on Sally. Now shoo. I did like she said. For the next 4 days, I waited for the cops to show up or for Connie to come and try to kill me. I'd peer out my window every few minutes, looking for some sign that bad things were coming or that they were going to pass me by. And for the first couple of days, I didn't notice anything out of place. And then I saw her. She was a small girl, probably in her 20s, though it was hard to say for sure. I'd never seen her before that I remembered, but now almost every time I looked outside there she was. Sitting on a bench, hanging out in an old blue beater, walking up and down the street while casually glancing up at me from time to time. God damn it. This was on the 4th day, and I was teetering on the edge between going out and confronting her and being too afraid to move when my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Colin, a guy I used to date in college and hadn't talked to in at least 5 years. Sorry for the blast from the past, but your sister found my number in one of your old cell phones. She says she doesn't have your current number and needs to talk to you. Please call her. Number is below. I swallowed, almost deleted the message and number, and then I pressed it instead. When she answered, she started crying. I thought she'd be mad, blaming me for ghosting all of them. But no, she was just sad and alone and wanting to tell her big sister that 2 weeks before, there was a fire at our parents' house. Police said it was most likely arson, but they were waiting on the final fire report. Dad died right away, but Mom held on in the burn unit until this morning. She didn't know how to get me and hadn't known if she should even call, but after it was all done, she thought of an old phone of mine I'd given her. It still had my contacts mixed in with hers, and she found Colin. I cried with her for a little while, told her I was sorry, told her I'd come home soon. I hadn't hung up the phone 5 minutes before a new text popped up. This one from Connie. Knock, knock. Outside my apartment door was a small metal box with a piece of tape on it that said, "Bury me somewhere secret and safe." On top of the box was a small key with a tag attached that said, "Keep me somewhere close and cozy." I tried to use the key to unlock the box, but of course it didn't work. Bury it tonight in a place of your choosing.
No.
Fuck you. I'm done. You fucking murderer. You're still on the clock. And I have detailed records of all the work you've done. Do it. 20 minutes later, I was carrying the box out to be buried. When I looked back, the girl was following me. It was as I was walking back to my car from burying the box that a thought occurred to me. I needed to get the other box, the one that Sally buried. It would have the proof I needed to show that my parents were murdered, that there was some giant plot to manipulate and kill people. It might even point to the girl following me as the killer, but that was probably a lie. She was probably just an idiot like me getting played by whatever this was. Heart pounding, I drove across town, back to where I'd followed Sally that day. I parked near the convenience store I'd hid in, cutting across and down the side street back to the long fence and the gap that led to the abandoned lot within. As I passed into it, I glanced back and saw the girl slowly walking down the street. That's okay. Let her come. I would show her too. I would show everybody and stop their sick game. I was half afraid the box would be gone. But it wasn't. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in. But when I did, the box opened right away. There was less inside than I expected. No letter or photos or weapon. Just a small phone. When I turned it on, rather than go to a home screen, a video started playing right away. It was in my parents' bedroom. They were tied down, gagged but still screaming, as something was sloshed across them. And then I heard my voice. Are you sure there's nothing wrong with me doing this? A match was struck and flared to life in front of the camera. This is what we deserve. The match lit my parents on fire, and as I listened to them scream, sobbing and crying along with them, I realized I wasn't alone. The girl was standing a few feet away from me, gun in one hand and badge in the other. Madison, I'm going to need you to come with me. My wife, Jennifer, died earlier this year. It feels like it happened yesterday, not because of my memory of that day, but because I don't think I have truly lived a day since it happened. It's funny how much can change in a day. The morning had been like any other. Jennifer was feeding our newborn, Molly, and I was humming along to the ink spots as I made us a breakfast omelet. Life was perfect, yet as soon as Jennifer took a ponderous look at her hands and remarked how cold they were, it signified the end to my idyllic life. 24 hours later, I held one of those cold, lifeless hands as a doctor explained the spread and effect of sepsis. I learned a few hard lessons that day. I don't deal well with pity, I don't deal well with social gatherings, and I don't deal well financially. I hadn't realized how much I had relied on Jennifer for my well-being. Every social occasion felt suffocating, and I quickly realized my low salary as a data analyst was not enough to afford the mortgage payments for our suburban new build. When Jennifer's father threw a lifeline in offering use of his rarely used holiday home in northern Brittany, I gladly accepted. I couldn't wait to leave those pitying looks behind. It was only when me and Molly arrived at the house did I feel the first pang of apprehension. I knew the house was old, maybe 3 or 4 centuries by what Jennifer's father had said, but it looked almost medieval. The roof was sound but concaved like a lens. The chimneys at either side of the building seemed to be desperately clinging onto the main structure. These chimneys led to the only heating sources of the house, 2 grand fireplaces, held aloft by large slabs of stone which still bared the pickaxe marks from which it had been chiseled. The upper floor was supported by great beams of oak. Although still sturdy, they wore the scars of centuries of woodworm spots. Even after thorough cleaning, the creaky upstairs floorboards would still patter the lower floor with dust when walked upon. Yet for its quirks, I felt almost content. The small village the house was situated in was incredibly quiet, meaning me and Molly were rarely disturbed. One might have guessed by the multitudes of shuttered windows that it was a ghost town, yet the spell would be broken by the hourly bells of the central church, which seemed to act an auditory timetable for the locals who would filter out of their homes to frequent the boulangerie or tobacco in their daily rituals. In my brief visits out of the home, I noticed how aged the population was. I couldn't remember ever seeing anyone younger than their 30s. Not that I had much interaction with them. I couldn't even speak French, let alone Breton, and they always seemed to eye me with caution. Coincidentally, the only English-speaking person in the village was my neighbor, an old lady named Dory and who looked almost as ancient as the building itself lived in the house adjacent. Our first interaction had been odd. I just returned from the corner shop, Molly strapped to my front and shopping bag in hand when as I put the keys in the door, I heard the clip-clop of wood on stone. I turned to face an old woman wearing clogs, donning a black and white motley dress with a frilly hat to match. Before I had a chance to greet her, she pointed a gnarled finger at Molly and in a thick Breton accent croaked, "Is the baby yours?" "Yes, she is. Her name is Molly," I replied cautiously. I didn't just find her now. I regretted my attempt at joke as Dorian's face furrowed into a stern glare. "This is no place for a child," she said coldly. "This house," I said, gesturing to the building. "It looks a bit shabby from the outside, but it's actually quite cozy on the inside," and Dorian cut me off by wagging her finger. No, this place is too dangerous for the child. We are too close to the chaos." For a moment I was confused as to what she meant, but then I realized she was referencing the valley that bordered the west side of the village. The Bretons use the word chaos to describe an area of literal primordial geological chaos. The chaos next to the village, like many others in Brittany, is a winding valley filled with immense boulders and strange formations. These great rocks, some being larger than houses, are said to have been tumbled and shifted into place after great calamities. The ancient nature of these valleys has spawned countless myths of spirits and creatures who have roamed these areas before the age of man. This mystique, however, had always been lost on me. "I wouldn't worry. I don't think Molly here is going to be wandering near those rocks anytime soon," I said, stroking her head as she began to stir. Dorian only shook her head. "Her mother should be watchful. It's not what wanders in that one should worry, but what wanders out." Before I could query what she meant, Molly began to cry. "Her mother is not with us anymore," I said quickly, feeling a sudden pang of anguish. "I better get in and feed this one. It was nice to meet you." We exchanged names and I made my way inside. As I unpacked my shopping and began mixing up some baby formula, I felt my grief creep back into my psyche. I had been in Brittany 3 months, and I realized I hadn't thought of Jennifer at all this last week. Being so busy with work and taking care of Molly, I realized I hadn't had much time to think. Now I was left alone with my thoughts. I remembered how greatly I missed her. The small things that were absent hurt the most. The way I would catch her in a jumping embrace when she returned from work. The smell of her on my pillows and the way she would sing Molly asleep. These small things that together form the love for a person. Now all I am left with is a memory. Molly's cries woke me from my mournful trance. "It's okay. Daddy is here," I said softly as I lifted the bottle to her mouth for her to feed. "What am I going to do, Molly?" I whispered as her mother's green eyes peered into mine. I sighed and pulled her closer to me. "At least I'll always have you." As if feeling my torment, Molly giggled and gave me one big toothless smile. I smiled back. "Okay, you little rascal. Time for bed. Daddy has some more work to do." I took Molly up to my bedroom to her cot, which was nestled in the corner by the window. "Sleep well, my little angel." I kissed her on the forehead and tucked her in. Downstairs, in the sitting room, I kindled a fire, opened up my laptop, and returned to my work. I don't know how much time passed until I heard that first bump. I'd been wearing headphones, so I didn't know whether I had misheard at first. Then another, and another. I shot to my feet as I heard Molly begin to wail. I heard what sounded like frantic footsteps echoing from upstairs. "Molly!" I shouted as I began bolting up the staircase and into the bedroom. I had expected something, anything but as I burst into the room, there was Molly, sound asleep in her cot. Had I imagined it? I stood in confusion as I felt a sudden breeze draft blow through the room. The window next to Molly's bed was slightly ajar. I was sure it hadn't been opened before. A low rumble of thunder emanated from the window. Rain began to patter quietly on the tiled roof. A strange tension filled me. I had never believed in ghosts, but this felt like something that a person who did believe in them would freak out about. Either way, whether it was a ghost or a rat, I suddenly felt very uncomfortable leaving Molly alone in that room. I carefully scooped Molly up from her cot and carried her back downstairs. She stirred as I entered the sitting room and on sight of the baby milk bottle left on the side. She began incessantly reaching towards it. "Still hungry, are we?" I said to Molly as I laid her in the small crib by the sofa. "Okay, just one more then." I hurried to the kitchen to create another mix. As I re-entered the sitting room, I could see her eyes were locked on the bottle with a strange intensity. "Wow, you really like this stuff, huh?" I reached down to feed her the bottle, but she practically snatched it away from me with dexterity I'd never seen before and began chugging the bottle down. "Whoa, settle down there, sweetie, you'll get a bad tummy." I tried to pull the bottle away, but she had a vice-like grip on the bottle. In sheer disbelief, I watched as the entire bottle's contents disappear in 10 seconds. As soon as she finished, she let out a small burp and threw the bottle from her crib. "Jesus Christ, Molly, where did that come from?" I said in shock. I had never seen Molly act such a way, or any baby for a matter of fact. Molly's green eyes locked with mine. Another rumble of thunder permeated through the room. A wave of uncanniness washed over me. Something seemed off, Molly seemed off. I wasn't sure whether it was the strangeness of the evening that had got to me, but the way she looked at me so intently almost unnerved me. As if trying to make use of the sudden attention, Molly began mumbling, her first word? Molly had never attempted speech like this before. My unease began dissipating as I realized I was about to bear witness to a wonderful moment. "What is it, Molly? Daddy is listening." I whispered, worrying any noise would pop this bubble of discovery. Molly mumbled, the words almost breaking free. "Yes, Molly," I said in anticipation. "More," Molly said with a certain deliberation. A laugh escaped my breath. "More? Molly, my angel, you have just had a whole bottle." Molly's brows furrowed as if understanding. "More," she repeated with a sterner tone. "No, Molly, it's past your bedtime already. You don't need another bottle," I said, the concern creeping back into my voice. "More, now!" Molly screamed as the first crack of lightning illuminated the room. She began flailing around manically in her crib. For a moment I just sat there in disbelief. Molly was only 10 months old. It wasn't impossible for her to begin speaking at this age, but her comprehension of my words felt just as unnatural as her sudden appetite. Molly also had never had a tantrum like this before. Sure, she had cried and gotten upset, but she had never screamed bloody murder like this before. I conceded. I had tried to get her stopped by speaking to her, gently rocking her, even singing to her, but still she screamed, demanding to be fed. I felt defeated as began mixing her another bottle. Jennifer would have been able to remedy this, I thought to myself, but a rapping at the door broke me from my pitiful trance. It was Dorian, dressed in a white nightgown and fluffy slippers which were slowly getting drenched by the intensifying rain. With a stony scowl plastered across her face, spoke to me while incessantly pointing her finger inside. "Your child has kept me up this last hour." "Oh God, Dory, and I'm sorry," I spluttered out. "It's Molly. I don't know what has gotten into her. She won't stop eating and cry." Dorian pushed past me before I could finish. "Where is she?" she demanded. "Let me have a look at her." She didn't have to ask. She simply followed the sound of the wailing. I quickly followed, baby bottle in hand. "She's never been this food manic before," I said, handing the bottle to Molly, which quickly silenced her screaming. "This has just begun tonight?" Dorian said, concern beginning to show in her face. "Yes, and she even spoke her first words, only to ask for more food," I said as Molly began to polish off the last of the bottle. Dorian just shook her head. "I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," she began, then paused. Dorian took one look at Molly, discarding her third bottle, and then looked up at me. "This is not your child," she said plainly. "What the hell are you talking about?" I said in astonishment. "Children are rare here. They are sought after, craved by things often not human." Dorian leaned down and picked up Molly, who had begun to cry again. This is Jetton handiwork. I know many mothers who notice too late or refuse to accept. Months go by, food depletes, yet the baby has not grown. She looked down at Molly, who had begun to properly wail again. "She'll be deep within the chaos now. I did try to warn you," she sighed. A sudden anger had begun to well in me. "That is my child you are holding. I don't know this Jetton, and I don't like how you refer to her. Give her back to me." I outstretched my arms expectantly. "You don't believe me?" Dorian chortled. "Look, I'll show you." She suddenly began squeezing her thumb hard on Molly's temple. She began to scream even louder. I returned that scream and lunged towards her. But before I could reach her, I heard the audible pop of Molly's eye leaving her skull. Yet what dropped to the floor wasn't flesh. It bounced and rolled to my feet like a marble. In a moment where time seemed to freeze, I picked it up. It was a perfect porcelain eye, carved and etched better than any prosthetic I had ever seen. I looked up to see a single-eyed Molly, her skin coating the inside of her socket like some badly treated doll. My stomach rolled over inside of me. What the hell is that thing? Speaking aloud what I was thinking. A changeling, a very deceiving fake and a cruel imitation of life Dory, and began indifferently as Molly began to flail against her. They are the creation of Jetton, foul and imperfect creatures who have only prevented the degeneration of their race through claiming the beautiful and whole. My mind began to race. The madness of the situation and the screams of Molly, or rather the changeling, had starting to make my head throb. "So where is the real Molly?" I asked desperately. "They'll have taken her to the caves under the chaos," Dory, and said calmly as another lightning strike lit up her dark eyes. "If you leave now, you might be able to get her before she's claimed. You'll need to bring this," she said, dangling the changeling in front of her. Even though I knew it wasn't human, my paternal instinct made me spring to grab the one-eyed baby and cradle it under my arm. "What am I supposed to do with her?" I asked, slightly unsettled by her handling of the child. "You'll use her to bargain. They'll only reveal themselves to you that way. Your child will be of value to them, but not more than the tool they used to acquire her. These things require a lot to craft," she gestured to the door. "Leave now. Go the deepest level of the chaos. If she's still alive, you'll hear her cries to guide your way. I hope you have more luck than I did." With so much information to process and so little time, all I could utter to her was "thank you," as I grabbed my coat and ran out into the storm. It was raining hard. The changeling cried incessantly. Even with my knowledge, I instinctively tried to shield it from the rain the best I could. The lights flicked on in some of the houses I ran past as I held the screaming child, and as the streetlights dissipated and the chaos unfolded in front of me, the only source of light would come from the inconsistent flashes of lightning that would illuminate the stone Goliaths I desperately clambered over. I was wading through the river of rock less than 5 minutes before I heard the first cries, faint and whistled through the wind. I heard her, my baby girl. I quickened my pace. In complete disregard for the unknown drops nestled between boulders, I leapt from rock to rock, clutching the imposter closely to my chest. Then I found it, a circular clearing which at its center held 3 great boulders, fallen into place to give the appearance of a great stone doorway leading into a black, endless abyss. A single cry echoed from the void. "Molly!" I shouted, but only thunder answered my call. I wish I brought a flashlight or a lighter, anything that would have let me see into that dark cavern. I had no way of seeing how deep or far it went. I didn't want to risk a fall unless there was no other option. I had to try as Dorian said. "I have your child," I called out to the abyss, "and I know you have mine." No response. "I want to trade. I return what is yours and you return what is mine," I shouted. I could feel the desperation creeping into my voice. Again, I heard Molly's cries echo out from the dark. I laid the changeling out on the stone. Its porcelain eye glistened in the moonlight. I realized I had no other option. I grabbed a loose stone and raised it above my head. "I'll kill it. I'll kill your creation if you don't bring me mine," I screamed in a sickening primal selfishness. I sickened me because I suddenly knew I would. If I couldn't have Molly, then they couldn't have this thing. A sudden guttural screech emanated from the darkness, an inhuman metallic scream that sounded like 100 forks being dragged across a chalkboard. "I'll do it, you fucking bastards," I yelled, The screams and cries of Molly from the cave seemed to sync with the abomination below me. "I'm going to give you till the count of 3, I said, my grip tightening on the rock. 1. Another hellish howl breaks from the dark. 2. The changeling looks up in a moment of terror. 3. A great crash of lightning strikes into a tree mere meters from where I was standing, blinding me with a light of sheer white for just a moment. As my vision clears, the rock still held aloft. I looked down onto 2 green, beady eyes. I immediately cast the rock aside and scooped Molly up into my arms. I don't know how long I sat there, quietly sobbing and whispering sweet comforts into Molly's ears. But as the rain began to soak through my outer layers, I got up and made my way home. I don't remember getting home at all, nor going to bed. All I remember is waking up on my sofa and Molly cradled in my arms. There were a few dying embers left in the fireplace. I could see the morning sun creeping through the gaps of my window shutters. For a brief, comforting moment, I thought I had just experienced the most terrible of dreams. However, this spell was shortly broken, as when I glanced to my table, a single porcelain eye stared back at me. The Challenger Deep is the deepest point of our planet. 6.8 miles below the ground we walk on, and nearly completely desolate. A true marvel of the earth and a miraculous piece of geography. Up until recently, most scientists believed that the Challenger Deep was the deepest point of our Earth. Keyword recently. I work for the NOAA, or National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as a submersible pilot. I've been on countless dives and seen countless things. It is an amazing job, one that I can't imagine ever not taking. If there is one place to appreciate nature and life as we know it, it's the ocean. Yet, the vastness of the ocean is a horrifying concept. We are slow in the water, and in the parts of the ocean where you can't see anything below you, it is hard to shake the thought of some massive marine predator snatching you up in its jaws. Despite this, our research knows no bounds, and around a month ago, my team made a massive discovery. A shift in the tectonic plates showed us that, in the cracks of the Challenger Deep, there was something below it, an entirely unexplored and unknown region of our world. The team was ecstatic, and negotiations for a press release were immediately brought to our supervisor. Unfortunately, he decided not to go ahead with the news just yet. According to him, after talks with the heads of the NOAA, they wanted us to go on an expedition to see what was there, and then showcase our findings to the world. I wasn't pleased with this, but I knew that it would make a better headline in the news if we actually found stuff down there. As one of the most experienced submersible pilots, I was chosen to head the mission. It would be a solo mission, one that, in my supervisor's words, would change the way we saw the ocean forever. So, after a ton of preparations and warnings and papers, my submersible was hovering over the water. My legs pointed directly at the opening to this new, deeper subsection of Earth's crust. My submersible, named Apollo by me, was reinforced heavily, with intense fortifications and the best titanium money could buy. She was a beautiful thing, one that I could never see myself as worthy of piloting. Yet, with one swift motion, I was dropped into sea. I won't bore you with the details of the descent, as nothing out of the ordinary occurred. I saw numerous creatures, critters, and otherwise, but nothing there was something I hadn't seen before, aside from a sperm whale swimming above me that made me nearly shit myself. After roughly 3 hours, I had finally hit the Challenger Deep. Admittedly, I was a little scared. Despite my numerous adventures into the bowels of deep blue, I had never actually been here at the bottom. It was empty, not a speck of life besides maybe some bacteria. If loneliness could have a textbook definition, it would be this: dark, cold, and desolate. The fact anything could live down here whatsoever was unbelievable. Move forward. My intercom sprung to life, jolting me out of my complete awe. I had completely forgotten why I was here, trapped in the sheer complexity of the nothingness of this place. I complied, moving Apollo upwards a bit. And that's when I saw it. A massive gash in the seafloor, stretching for what could have been miles. It was wide, too, almost the entire width of a school bus. This wasn't what was shown in our scannings, with the gap being smaller and less wide. Whatever we had seen before, it had expanded. I reported this to my supervisor, who shared the same mild perturbance that I did. Maybe another shift occurred here recently. Maybe. His lackluster answer to my report did not inspire confidence, but I had to keep going. I'm about to enter the opening, I said with a very obvious amount of uncertainty in my voice. Go ahead. Good luck, man, my supervisor responded. And with that, I entered the new deepest point of our Earth. The opening was normal in nature, with nothing but rock and earth surrounding my descent for the first 20 meters or so. However, after this, it all became dark again. There was no more wall, no more gash. I checked my sonar, and my mouth dropped to the floor in sheer amazement. I was inside a gigantic cave, nearly 1 mile on diameter. I was at a loss of words, my thoughts taking over where my mouth couldn't. My mind began to race, with intense ideas and fears and terrors unveiling themselves. What could be down here? Is it dangerous? Will I die? Etc. I reported my findings to my supervisor, who was, just like me, completely starstruck. Are you sure that's what you see? My supervisor sputtered out. Yes. This submarine had been equipped with all the latest technology, and one of those was a radar, just in case anything like a whale or other large creature happened to be approaching me. This radar never failed, but it hadn't sprung to life in hours due to the lack of anything big at this depth. Yet it was suddenly firing off. I moved to look at it, and to my both amazement and terror, 5 large blips were moving towards me. I tried to keep myself together, desperately breathing in and out in a pathetic attempt to keep myself from hyperventilating. But it wasn't working. Nothing of this size should be down at this depth. My mind began to picture beasts, monsters, and ravenous creatures coming to rip me apart. In my nervous state, I hadn't realized my supervisor had been trying to talk to me. After nearly tripping over myself, I clumsily reopened the line. Why have you stopped? What is it? My supervisor sternly yet curiously asked. There's 5. Something moving towards me, sir. I have no idea what they are. I stammered out, my voice shaky and completely broken by the fear that gripped my throat. Wait, are you serious? How big are they? My supervisor asked. I checked the blips. They were 5 seconds from my position. They weren't massive, but they were still too big for this environment. A solid 7 to 9 feet in length.
Roughly 8 feet.
Just then, I felt a strong, hard, and intense hit come from the outside. Not like something was trying to break in, but rather like something had bumped into Apollo. I checked the 3D cameras, checking the side at which I felt the collision. I caught a glimpse of a tail, floating off into the darkness. It looked rigid and crustacean-like, shaped almost like an ace of spades. As I tried to make sense of it, another bump came from above. Whatever these things were, they were strong. Not strong enough to break through titanium, but strong enough to move the vessel a solid foot. I checked the cameras again, this time seeing a pair of legs. They looked like they came from some sort of insect, akin to the legs of a spider, but thicker and with barbs. Once again, it floated into the darkness. Once again, a hit came, this time targeting the pilot's chamber, scaring the piss out of me. I didn't need to check the cameras. The thing hit my window, and it didn't move from my view. I was completely stuck, entranced by what could only be described as a miracle of nature. A living fossil, floating in front of me, locking its round, pure black eyes with me, practically hypnotizing me to admire its sheer beauty, was a massive, yellowish-tan prehistoric creature. A eurypterid, commonly known by paleontologists and biologists as a sea scorpion. I was dumbfounded. Sea scorpions had gone extinct over 250 million years ago when the Great Dying happened, otherwise known as the Permian extinction event. Eurypterids were completely wiped out by this, so I was at a loss of words. No words could ever describe what I was feeling. I think it was admiring me back. It surely hadn't seen humans before. It tilted its insect-y head at me, wondering what I was. Suddenly, more of them came to the window, dumbfounded at what they were seeing. Baby sea scorpions sat atop what I assumed was their mothers, analyzing and internalizing what I was. I began taking photographs of the sea scorpions and sent them to my supervisor. He beamed back to me on the intercom as the cheers of my colleagues rang out in the background. "This is an amazing find. Do you see anything else?" "Not right now, but I'll update you if I do." As I resigned from the intercom once again, the sea scorpions continued to look at me. They almost seemed to gawk at me as I did the same to them. Suddenly, the all cleared and a much larger, older-looking one got up to the glass. My submersible had arms, grabbers used to move away debris and rocks/minerals. It moved its shelled body to the arms, rubbing up against it, before lowering its head to show me a large parasite that had binded to it. I was confused as to what it was incentivizing, until finally I understood that it wanted me to remove the thing. The arms were not surgical, but fortunately this parasite was big, meaning the arms could hopefully remove it. I knew it was risky, and if I accidentally killed it, I could be in massive trouble. However, somewhere deep within me, I knew it was desperate. So, as carefully as I could, I maneuvered the arms to reach the critter. It was very much like piloting a claw machine, with every movement a stressor on my psyche. Finally, I had a good grip on the parasite, with the other arm holding the elder sea scorpion's head steady, and with one good tug, the little shit came right off. The sea scorpion jolted, shaking its head in what I could only assume was pain. Yet, once the pain subsided, it looked happy, spinning in place with an upbeat pattern. It got back up to the window, and with a happy, almost animal-like bunt against Apollo, it descended back into the depths, with the rest of its family unit following it. With that experience over, I descended further, my mind straight and my heart beating with just a little more pride. I reported the encounter with my staff, who, when shown photos, absolutely thrilled. Fortunately, my supervisor was happy with me and greenlighted the further descent. The sonar continued to prove my suspicion, with the cave proving to be a worthwhile endeavor for the entire NOAA. Eventually, I reached the middle of the cave when the radar came back to life. Something was approaching the ship again, something absolutely gigantic. It must have been at least 60 feet in length. Now, I was someone who generally despised people who promoted the idea of megalodon living in the trench. However, seeing the radar blip with a massive white dot, you can't blame me for being scared shitless of whatever was approaching. I had already seen a literal living fossil, and I wasn't against the idea of a massive monster being down here anymore. However, my fears were calmed as I realized how slow it was moving. Hell, it might as well have been sitting still. I entered the intercom again to my supervisor, who told me to move towards it. Despite my fears, curiosity got the best of me, and I moved towards the blip. In the darkness, I couldn't see a damn thing, so I began to brace myself for a collision, just in case. But I never reached it, not before it let out a deep, loud, and inundating shockwave of noise. It sounded like a whale's call, but significantly louder and with more bass. My head rung from the sound, my heart nearly exploding out of sheer terror and anxiety. Suddenly, the lights came face to face with the source of the noise. Thinking back on it now, humans really are tiny in comparison to some things. We are the apex predator, but we definitely aren't the top dogs in some areas. Size is definitely one of them. In front of Apollo was a gigantic fish, bony and large. Its head looked like it was made exclusively from bone, armored and rigid. The rest of its figure slowly came into view, its large body unveiling itself to the light. Another living fossil, a large, healthy, and majestic fish. Leadsichthys, the behemoth paid me no mind, its gargantuan body regarding me with no more than what felt like a simple look. Of course, I began taking photos and sent them to my supervisor. The intercom shot to life again, and the ovation of my peers could be heard once more. Eventually, its large, scaly torso moved into the darkness, never to be seen again. I was given the green light to go further down, but I realized after 3 seconds of descent that I finally reached the bottom. It was different than the Challenger Deep. It was gray in color, with little to no sand on its surface. Jagged scars permeated from its surface, scattered across a variety of areas. What was interesting was that the bottom felt soft, almost like it was a cushion rather than rock. I began talking to my supervisor, discussing what the next move was. He wanted to explore the place further to see if any other living fossils existed down here. I couldn't blame him. Everything we knew about the ocean and its inhabitants had been flipped on its head. It was amazing. As I began to move forward, something odd happened. The ground beneath me began to vibrate a bit. At first I attributed it to shifting plates, but then, out of nowhere, the ground moved completely, nearly knocking over Apollo. Suddenly, the radar blipped a dot out, but it wasn't a dot at all. The white blip I would have usually seen encompassed almost the entire radar circle, as if the entire area around me was a living organism. I then did a sonar scan and saw what my mind had been trying to suppress ever since the radar did what it did. What could only be described as a leviathan was moving, and this movement was occurring right beneath me. What I had landed on wasn't ground. It was a living thing, and I had just woke it up. In my panic, I tried to turn on the intercom, but it wouldn't even go. The station I had been using to communicate with my team had been taken completely off the system. So I did the only other thing left. Get the hell out. I began piloting the submersible out of Dodge, moving it as fast as it could go. Suddenly, Apollo stopped completely. Her engine was on, but she wouldn't budge. I checked the sonar and I wasn't stuck on anything. It simply wouldn't budge. The intercom then came on, but my supervisor's voice was replaced by a loud, yellowing, and deep voice.
No.
Stay. I was completely frozen, my mind a jumble of fear, shock, and confusion. Was it talking to me? I slowly shot the intercom back on. Who are you? I stammered out, my voice a complete mess of sounds and obvious nervousness. The creature bellowed back, its voice calm, yet commanding. I am not a who. Even if I were, it does not matter. My mind began jumbling thoughts, many associated with how on earth this thing was speaking English, or for that matter, speaking at all. Why are you here? How did you find this place? I responded truthfully. I am a marine explorer. A shift in Earth's sea crust opened up a hole beyond what we thought was the deepest point of Earth. I was tasked with going in. I couldn't see it, and thank God I couldn't. Probably would have given me a heart attack. But I could tell it was thinking of what to say. Are you here to harm or to heal? I was scared to answer, but I had helped that sea scorpion earlier. I thought that, if what I believed was my life being on the line, telling this deep-sea monster I had helped it would be useful. Earlier, I encountered some eurypterids. He helped this elder one with a parasite. It intook my words and responded back. Thank you. In the calming nature of its voice, I eased slightly, my mind gaining some clarity to ask it further questions. What is this place? I asked. The creature didn't respond for a while, but after what felt like eons, it finally spoke up. Many, many years ago, long before your species ever walked this planet, species of different eras managed to survive their respective calamities. The eurypterids, as you call them, were not suited for their new world. So, I called upon them to descend to this cavern, instilling them with an increased strength and tolerance for the conditions here. As time passed, more water-dwelling creatures came, and they now reside here. I am the guardian of this place, my purpose solely to defend and protect the nature here. I was at a loss of words. This thing, whatever it was inherently some sort of underwater deity. I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around the concept before it spoke through the intercom again. You shouldn't be here. I snapped out of my thoughts, And upon hearing this, I became more confused than ever. I guess it could understand what I was thinking because it fired up the intercom again. You and your congregation are benevolent, but the rest of your kind is not. They pillage, loot, and destroy the ecosystem above. Many recent underwater creatures have come here, and they speak of you and your species' mayhem. I will seal this hole again, and you are to never return here. Do not tell any of your kind of my existence, and leave with the knowledge you have now, but no more. I understood. It was right, unfortunately. I see, I muttered. The beast did not speak through the intercom this time, only making an incomprehensibly loud bellow that, if anywhere else, could have most likely took down a whole city through decibels alone. Before I began to comply and go ahead and ascend, one more question entered my mind. How did you end up here? The intercom stayed silent for the longest time, before it echoed to life for the last time of my journey. Some secrets are best left secrets. A part of me was slightly annoyed at this, but I understood, and so I began my ascent. After resurfacing, my colleagues bombarded me with questions, demanding to know why I had basically gone off the grid. My supervisor was majorly pissed, but at the end of the day, none of it mattered. The next day, in the dead of night, I went back to my post on the station to see if the hole had closed, and sure enough, it did. I don't think I'll ever forget my experiences in the deep, and to be frank, who could? It was a jarring experience, and one that I think I'll never be able to truly comprehend. The media couldn't get it either, as the images of modern-day prehistoric monsters have swept through the internet like wildfire, with every site on the web talking about how interesting this truly is. If another crack forms or Earth cuts open again and we find another one of these, however, I will not go back, for I still don't know what it was, and I don't want to find out. This happened a long time ago when I was a kid. My hometown, well, it wasn't the kind of place people wrote postcards about. It was small, tucked away, and chronically underdeveloped. The kind of town where the biggest news was usually the mill threatening layoffs again, or the high school football team losing another game. We were in a slow decline, and everyone knew it even if they didn't say it out loud. Hope was a scarce commodity, something people clung to in whatever form they could find it. And that's where the disappearances came in. It was a known problem, a quiet, persistent ache in the community fabric. Kids, mostly teenagers, but sometimes younger, would just vanish. One week they'd be in class, complaining about homework or dreaming about getting their driver's license, and the next, their desk would be empty. Their locker would stay shut. Whispers would start. The official line, the one that settled over the town like a comforting but threadbare blanket, was that they'd run away, gone to the city, seeking a better life, adventure, opportunities that our stagnant town couldn't offer, and people, by and large, chose to believe it. It made a grim sort of sense. Who wouldn't want to escape? Who wouldn't yearn for something more than the dusty streets and the resigned faces? But even as a kid, something about it pricked at me. Why would everyone who left cut ties so completely? No letters home, no calls, not even a rumor trickling back through a friend of a friend. It was as if they'd stepped off the edge of the world. Families would grieve, of course, but then they'd latch onto that better life narrative. It was easier than confronting the void, the awful, echoing silence these kids left behind. Believing they were thriving elsewhere was a balm, a way to keep the creeping despair of our town at bay. It allowed a sliver of vicarious hope. If they could make it out, maybe the town itself wasn't a complete dead end. I didn't have many friends, preferred my own company mostly. My walk home from school was usually solitary, a straight shot down Main Street, then a turn onto Elm, and a few more blocks through a quieter residential area. It was routine, predictable, until that one afternoon. The day started like any other. School droned on. The final bell was a release. I slung my backpack over my shoulder and started the familiar trek. The air was that specific kind of late autumn cool, crisp but not yet biting. Leaves crunched underfoot. I was about halfway down Main Street when I first noticed him. He was standing across the road, near the boarded-up storefront of what used to be a pharmacy. What caught my eye wasn't that he was there, but that he didn't fit. Our town had its share of eccentrics, but this was different. He was wearing a suit. Not a work suit like Mr. Henderson, the bank manager, wore. This was darker, a bit too formal, and it seemed stiff, like it wasn't made of normal fabric. And it was impeccably clean, which was an oddity in itself in our perpetually dusty town. He was just standing there, not looking at anything in particular, but his stillness was alert, like a heron waiting by the water. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe a salesman who'd taken a wrong turn, or someone visiting family. I kept walking. When I glanced across the street again a block later, he was still there, but he'd moved. He was now parallel to me, keeping pace, but on the other side. A faint prickle of unease started on the back of my neck. It was probably nothing. Coincidence. I made the turn onto Elm Street. It was quieter here, fewer cars, fewer people out and about. I chanced to look back. He'd made the turn too. He was still across the street, but definitely following. The distance between us was the same, but the casualness was gone from his posture. He was walking with a distinct purpose now, his gaze fixed in my general direction. My heart started to beat a little faster. This wasn't right. Salesmen didn't follow kids home like this. I told myself to be calm. Maybe he was just going the same way. But Elm Street didn't lead to any businesses, just more houses and, eventually, the old scrapyard at the edge of town. I picked up my pace. Not quite running, but a fast, determined walk. I risked another glance. He matched my speed effortlessly. The suit didn't ripple or bunch. It moved with him as if it were part of him. His face was indistinct from this distance, shadowed, but I could feel his attention on me like a physical weight. Panic began to bubble up, cold and sharp. This wasn't a coincidence. I needed to lose him. My mind raced. I knew these streets like the back of my hand. He didn't. Instead of continuing straight towards my house, I made a sharp, unplanned right onto a narrow alleyway that cut between two houses. It was a shortcut I sometimes used, overgrown with weeds and usually littered with overflowing trash cans. It smelled damp and forgotten. I broke into a jog, backpack thumping against my spine. When I emerged onto the next street, breathless, I looked back. For a glorious few seconds, the alley was empty. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. I'd lost him. Then he stepped out of the alley. He didn't look rushed or out of breath. He just appeared, smooth and silent, and turned his head, his gaze locking onto me instantly. The distance was shorter now, maybe half a block. I could see his face a little better. It was pale, unremarkable in features, yet utterly devoid of expression. No anger, no curiosity, just a blank, waiting stillness. The suit was still pristine. Terror, raw and undiluted, seized me. This was not normal. This was wrong. My only thought was to run. I bolted. My house was still several blocks away, but in the opposite direction now, thanks to my detour. Ahead of me, at the end of this less traveled road, lay the town's unofficial dump, the scrapyard. It was a sprawling mess of rusted cars, discarded appliances, mountains of junk, and treacherous piles of debris. Kids sometimes dared each other to go in, but it was generally avoided. It was vast, chaotic, and dangerous. It was also my best bet. I ran harder than I thought I could, legs pumping, lungs burning. The scrapyard fence, a rickety chain-link affair with several convenient holes, loomed closer. I didn't dare look back. I could hear his footsteps, though a steady, rhythmic beat on the pavement behind me, never getting closer, never falling further behind. It was an unnervingly consistent sound. I dove through a gap in the fence, scraping my knee, the pain a distant throb compared to the fear coursing through me. The scrapyard enveloped me. The smell was overwhelming: rust, oil, decaying upholstery, damp earth, and something else, something faintly sweet and rotten. Towers of junk rose on either side, creating narrow, winding pathways. I scrambled deeper into the maze, hoping the sheer complexity of the place would be my salvation. I ducked behind a teetering stack of bald tires, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I strained my ears, listening for his pursuit over the sound of my own ragged breathing. Silence, or what passed for silence in a place like this, the groan of stressed metal, the rustle of unseen things in the weeds, the distant hum of the highway. Maybe, just maybe, I'd actually lost him this time. The thought was a fragile flicker of hope. He wouldn't know these paths. He'd give up. I waited, crouched and trembling, for what felt like an eternity but was probably only a minute or two. The adrenaline was starting to ebb, leaving me shaky and cold. I had to get out of here, but not back the way I came. There was another, more dilapidated section of fence on the far side of the yard, closer to the woods. If I could reach that, I could cut through the trees and circle back to my neighborhood. Slowly, cautiously, I peeked around the tires. The narrow passage was empty. I took a deep breath and started to move again, trying to be as quiet as possible, weaving through the metallic skeletons of forgotten vehicles and mountains of discarded household goods. The sun was beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed and shifted with every gust of wind. The light was turning that burnished gold that signals the end of the day. I was nearing what I judged to be the far edge of the scrapyard. I could see the ragged line of trees through a gap in a pile of twisted metal. Freedom felt tantalizingly close. I navigated around a rusted-out hulk of an old pickup truck, its windows long gone, and then I froze. He was there, standing directly in my path, not 10 feet away, by the very gap in the fence I'd been aiming for. He was just there, as if he'd been waiting, as if he'd known exactly where I was going. My blood ran cold. Every nerve screamed. There was no surprise on his face, no triumph. Just that same blank, patient watchfulness. The impeccably clean suit seemed to absorb the fading light, making him look darker, more solid. He took a step towards me. A strangled sob escaped my throat. I didn't think. I reacted. I spun around and plunged back into the labyrinth of junk. Deeper this time. There was no plan, just a desperate need for distance. This time, I heard him coming after me immediately, and he was faster, much faster. His footsteps weren't the steady, rhythmic pace from before. They were quick, unnervingly light, yet covering ground at a speed that didn't seem humanly possible for someone in a suit, navigating this treacherous terrain. It was like he was gliding over the debris. Panic clawed at my throat, making it hard to breathe. I scrambled, tripped, caught myself, pushed onward. My lungs ached. My scraped knee throbbed. Tears streamed down my face, blurring my vision. I could hear him getting closer. I spotted a small, dark opening beneath a pile of flattened car bodies, the kind that had been crushed into grotesque rectangles. It looked like a shallow cave of rusted metal. Without a second thought, I threw myself to the ground and wormed my way into the tight space. It was cramped, filthy, and smelled of stale oil and damp earth. Jagged edges of metal pressed into me from all sides. I squeezed myself as far back as I could, until my shoulders hit the unyielding, cold ground at the very back. I was completely hidden, enveloped in oppressive darkness, save for a sliver of grayish light filtering through a small gap near the front of my metallic tomb. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Then footsteps, slow now, measured, moving around the pile of cars I was under. I could hear the crunch of debris beneath his shoes, the occasional soft metallic scrape. He was searching. Through the tiny gap, I saw a sliver of his dark trousers pass by. Then again, he was circling, My heart felt like it was going to explode. I pressed my face into the dirt, trying to muffle the sound of my own terrified gasps. Every instinct screamed at me to stay still, to become part of the earth and rust around me. The sun was definitely going down now. The already dim light filtering into my hiding spot was fading rapidly. The shadows outside were lengthening, merging, swallowing details. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried an unnatural resonance that vibrated through the metal around me. "Come on out, kid." Pause. "There's no need to hide. We can just talk." Talk? The absurdity of it was a fresh stab of fear. What could we possibly talk about? I stayed silent, frozen. "I know you're in here somewhere." His voice continued, still calm, but with an edge now, like a carefully sharpened blade. "This yard isn't that big. I'll find you." He moved again, his footsteps methodically covering the area around my hiding spot. I could hear him shifting debris, the screech of metal on metal. Each sound sent a jolt of terror through me. The light through my gap was almost gone. It was becoming truly dark under the cars. And then the voice changed. "Sweetheart, are you in there? It's Mommy." My blood turned to ice. It was my mother's voice. Not just similar, it was her. The exact tone, the cadence, the little lilt she had when she was worried. The sound of it, so familiar, so comforting in any other context, was now the most terrifying thing I had ever heard. "Baby, please come out. I was so worried when you didn't come home. What are you doing in this awful place? Come out, it's getting dark. Let's go home." A part of my brain, the logical part, knew it wasn't her. Couldn't be. But the raw, primal fear, coupled with that perfect imitation, a tiny, treacherous part of me wanted to believe it, wanted to crawl out and find her there, to have this nightmare end. "Please, honey," the voice pleaded, laced with a perfect imitation of maternal distress. "You're scaring me. Just come out. Everything will be okay." Tears were flowing freely now, silent tears of utter terror and confusion. I bit down hard on my lip to stop myself from making a sound, tasting the coppery tang of blood. He was trying to lure me out. He knew my mother's voice. How could he know that? The last vestiges of daylight vanished. The scrapyard was now plunged into near-total darkness, relieved only by the faintest ambient glow from the distant town lights, which barely penetrated this deep into the junk. Under the cars, it was absolute black. I was blind, relying only on sound. I thought I was doomed. He would find me. He was patient, methodical. It was only a matter of time. Her voice had stopped. There was only silence for a moment. A heavy, pregnant silence. Then a new sound. A low groan, guttural and pained. It wasn't human. It was followed by a rasping, wet growl, like an animal in distress. It seemed to come from right outside my hiding spot. My fear ratcheted up to a level I didn't know was possible. What was happening? The growls intensified, mixed with harsh, choking sounds. It sounded like he was in agony, like the darkness itself was hurting him. And then, his own voice again, but ragged now, strained, filled with a furious, desperate anger that was far more terrifying than his earlier calm. Damn it all! The light, gone too soon. Another pained snarl. Then, chillingly clear, his words cut through the night, seeming to echo in the sudden stillness. "I will find you eventually, kid. Just in another day, perhaps." There was a strange rustling sound then, like dry leaves skittering across concrete or sand pouring from a height. It lasted only a few seconds, and then nothing. Absolute silence.
No footsteps. No breathing. No pant growls.
He was gone. I stayed huddled in that metallic coffin for what felt like hours, too terrified to move, too shocked to process. Eventually, the cramping in my limbs and the desperate need to escape the crushing darkness forced me to act. Trembling uncontrollably, I slowly, agonizingly, pushed myself out from under the cars. The scrapyard was utterly dark, save for the sliver of moon that had risen. I stood there, shaking, expecting him to reappear at any moment. But there was nothing, no sign of him. Where he had been standing, or where I thought he had been from the sounds, there was just dust. A faint, fine layer of something dark on the ground, already being disturbed by the night breeze. It looked like a patch of exceptionally dry soil, out of place amongst the damp earth and rusted metal. I didn't wait to examine it. I ran. I ran out of that scrapyard the way I'd come, not caring about the noise I made, fueled by a primal terror that lent my legs impossible strength. I ran through the dark streets, not stopping until I slammed through my front door, gasping for breath, collapsing in a heap in the hallway. My parents were frantic. I was covered in dirt, grease, my knee was bleeding, my clothes were torn, and I was hysterical. I tried to tell them. I babbled about a man, a suit, the scrapyard, his voice, my mother's voice, but it came out as a jumbled, incoherent mess. They thought I'd had a bad scare, maybe got chased by a dog, or had a run-in with some older bullies. They cleaned me up, bandaged my knee, and put me to bed. I never told them the full truth. How could I? How could I explain that the man who chased me, the man who sounded like my mother, had turned to dust when the sun went down? They would have thought I was crazy. Maybe I was. But I knew what I saw, and I knew what I heard. That thing in the suit wasn't just a serial killer or a kidnapper. It was something else. Something that couldn't stand the night, or perhaps couldn't exist without daylight in its physical form. Something that hunted in the full light of the sun. The disappearances in our town, I started to see them in a new light. Were they all just kids running away for a better life? Or had some of them, like me, taken a wrong turn on their way home, on a day when the sun didn't set a little too quickly? Had they been lured by familiar voices out of hiding, into the waiting darkness? The thought made me sick. That promise? I will find you eventually, kid. Just in another day, perhaps, has haunted me ever since. I moved away from that town as soon as I could. I try to live a normal life, but I'm always aware of the sun. I don't like being out alone when it's full day, and sometimes on quiet evening, when the shadows grow long, I think I hear a faint rustling, like dry leaves or sand. I don't know why it seemed to turn to dust. I don't know what it was, but I know it was real, and I know it wanted me. The gaps in our town weren't just kids leaving for the city. Some of those gaps were torn open by things that thrive under the daylight.